Hello and welcome. You're about to read a special retelling of Gulliver's Travels by Jonathan Swift, a simplified and shortened version of the original story, written in easy English to help you learn. Read it out loud, repeat after the audio, and copy the rhythm and tone. This is called the shadowing method, and it's a fun, powerful way to improve your English. Now, let's travel with Gulliver to strange lands and discover the wonders that wait. Part 1, A Voyage to Lilliput. Chapter 1. My name is Lemuel Gulliver. I was born in England, in a place called Nottinghamshire. My father had 5 sons. I was the third. When I was 14, my father sent me to Emmanuel College at Cambridge. I studied there for 3 years. After that, my father could not pay for my education, so I left. I wanted to learn medicine. So I became an apprentice to a doctor in London named Mr. James Bates. I stayed with him for 4 years. During that time, I studied very hard. I also learned many things about navigation and mathematics, because I wanted to travel. Later, I studied medicine at the University of Leiden in Holland. I did not stay long. I soon returned to London, where Mr. Bates helped me get a job as a doctor on a ship. I worked on many ships for several years, traveling to the East and West Indies and to other countries. After some time, I returned to England and married a woman named Mary Burton. Her father was a businessman. Mr. Bates helped me again by introducing me to patients, but when he died, my business slowed down. So I decided to travel again. In May of 1699, I joined a ship called the Antelope as a ship's doctor. We were sailing to the South Seas. The journey began well, but after some time, we hit a terrible storm near the East Indies. The winds were strong, and the waves were huge. The ship crashed into rocks and broke apart. 6 of us got into a small boat. We rowed as hard as we could, trying to reach land. But soon, the sea swallowed our boat. I swam for my life. I do not know what happened to the others. The waves pushed me forward for a long time. At last, I saw land. I was very tired, but I reached the shore. I crawled onto the beach and fell asleep. When I woke up, it was morning. I tried to stand up, but I could not move. My arms and legs were tied with many thin ropes. My long hair was tied to the ground too. I felt something walking on my body. It was a tiny person, only 6 inches tall. Then I saw more of them. Soon, there were hundreds. They all looked at me and climbed on me. Some had bows and arrows. Others had spears. I shouted loudly. The little men ran back, but came again soon. One of them climbed up on my chest. He looked at me and waved. I moved my head a little to show I would not hurt them. He seemed happy. They built a platform near my head. One man climbed on it and made a speech. I did not understand the words. I answered by pointing to my mouth to ask for food. They brought me tiny pieces of meat and bread. I ate a lot of their food. They also brought me something to drink in small barrels. It tasted like good wine. After eating, I felt sleepy. They say there was something in the wine to make me sleep. While I slept, they made a big machine to carry me. It was a platform with wheels. 900 men worked to lift me onto it using ropes and pulleys. They tied me with more ropes so I could not escape. Then they pulled the platform with many tiny horses, 1,500 of them. It was a slow journey. We traveled for a day and a half. At last, we reached their city, called Mildendo. The people were very curious. Thousands came to see me, but they had to stay far away. The emperor had made a special building to hold me. It was an old temple, the largest in the city. They made a hole in the door so I could crawl in. Inside the temple, they chained my left leg to the wall. I could walk a short distance outside, about 6 yards. I was not free, but they treated me kindly. They brought me food and clothes and sent people to teach me their language. The emperor himself came to see me. He climbed onto a high tower and looked at me. He seemed amazed but not afraid. I showed respect by bowing my head. I tried to speak, but he did not understand. Still, he saw that I was gentle. I did not try to hurt anyone. So he gave an order that I should be fed and taken care of. I was still a prisoner, but I hoped I could soon earn their trust. For now, I lived in the old temple with a chain on my leg and many tiny people watching me. Chapter 2. The people of Lilliput came to visit me every day. I was still lying on the ground, with my leg chained. I was careful not to hurt anyone. I moved slowly and gently. After some time, they saw that I was not dangerous. The emperor gave orders to let me stand up, as long as I stayed within the length of the chain. I was happy to move again. I stood and looked around. The fields were green. The city of Mildendo was close by. From where I stood, the tallest houses looked like small boxes. The people looked like insects. Still, they were polite and well organized. Each day, 6 officials visited me. Their job was to teach me the Lilliputian language. I listened and repeated their words. I learned quickly. After 3 weeks, I could speak well enough to understand and answer basic questions. The emperor wanted to know everything about me. So he sent smart men to talk with me. They asked about my country, my people, my religion, and my job. I told them I was from a land far away, across the sea. I said I had come in peace and did not want to hurt anyone. The emperor was pleased. He asked if I would help his country. I said yes, if he treated me kindly and gave me food and clothes. He agreed. One day, the emperor came to see me again. This time, he was sitting on a platform carried by 20 men. He spoke in a loud voice. I bowed down and gently kissed his hand. He smiled. He asked me to show him the things in my pockets. I told him that some items might be dangerous. He promised I would get them back. So I let 2 guards search me. They climbed ladders and walked all over me. They made a list of everything they found. They found a handkerchief the size of a sail, a comb bigger than a door, a small silver box with powder, my snuff box, a long knife, a pistol, a pair of boots, a telescope, a notebook and pen, my watch, which made a loud ticking sound. They were very curious about the watch. It was round, with a glass face. They watched the hands move and heard the ticking. I told them I used it to tell time. They were amazed. I gave them the knife and pistol to examine. I showed how the knife could cut wood and how the pistol made fire and noise. They were afraid but also impressed. The emperor ordered all the items returned to me, except the pistol and the powder box. He said those were too dangerous. Next, the emperor gave me permission to walk around the countryside, still with the chain on my leg. I could walk in a circle about 12 yards across. People came from all over the island to see me. They stood on platforms or climbed hills to look at me. I always waved and smiled. I picked up children with great care and gently set them down. I became very popular. People sang songs about me. They called me the Man Mountain. The emperor now trusted me more. He gave me servants to help me dress and bring food. He built a special house for me near the temple. It was big for their size, but still very small for me. I had to lie on the ground to sleep, with the roof open to the sky. Every morning, 300 cooks brought food. It took many carts to carry enough for one of my meals. I ate bread, meat, fruits, and drank wine. I always thanked the emperor for his kindness. Soon, I learned about the customs of the Lilliputians. They had strange ways of choosing leaders. In the emperor's court, people got jobs not by being smart or good, but by dancing on a tightrope. The highest jumper often won the job. I watched a rope dancing contest. The men wore colorful clothes. They jumped and flipped in the air. One man jumped so high, he touched the emperor's chair. He became the new treasurer. Another custom was crawling under a stick. The emperor held a small stick in his hands. The men had to crawl under it without touching it. Then they had to jump over it. Those who passed the test got colored ribbons. The red ribbon meant courage. The green ribbon meant honesty. The blue ribbon meant wisdom. These ribbons were worn around the waist and shone with pride. The emperor asked me to hold the stick one day. I watched the men try hard to pass. It looked like a game, but it was very serious for them. I thought it was strange, but I respected their ways. Later, the emperor gave me a great honor. He made me a Nardak, the highest title in the land. He gave me a golden badge to wear. Everyone bowed when they saw me. I promised to serve the emperor and protect Lilliput. But I said I would never hurt anyone unless ordered to by law. He agreed. One day, the emperor told me about a problem. Lilliput had an enemy island called Blefuscu. The 2 lands had fought many wars. The reason was strange. They argued about how to break eggs. Long ago, people broke eggs at the big end. Then a new emperor said eggs must be broken at the small end. Some people refused. They left Lilliput and went to Blefuscu. Now the 2 countries were enemies. The emperor said Blefuscu was planning to attack soon. He asked if I could help defend Lilliput. I said yes, but only if I could do it peacefully. He agreed and said we would talk more the next day. So my life in Lilliput continued. I was their giant friend, learning their ways, helping their emperor, and slowly becoming part of their tiny world. Chapter 3. The Emperor often visited me now. He liked to talk with me and watch me eat. He was very curious about everything I did. He often asked me to show my strength or strange skills. Sometimes, he brought important people from his court to watch. One day, I asked if I could entertain the Emperor. He agreed happily. I took out my walking stick and did tricks. I threw it in the air and caught it. I balanced it on my finger. The people clapped and laughed. The Emperor was pleased. Then I showed him my pocket watch again. I opened it and held it to his ear. The loud ticking surprised him. I said it was how I measured time. They had no watches in Lilliput. They used the position of the sun instead. Another time, the Emperor asked to see what else I carried. I showed him my comb, scissors, a magnifying glass, and my handkerchief. They looked like strange machines to the Lilliputians. I let the scientists of the court write down everything. They described each item in detail and drew pictures. They wrote about my handkerchief like a giant sail, silver snuff box that made people sneeze, wallet filled with round golden coins, long knife used for cutting meat, folding scissors with two sharp arms, pocket telescope that made far things look close, glasses for helping me read small writing, razor blade that shaved the hair from my face, small pen for writing in a notebook. They kept the list in the royal library. The Emperor said these things showed how clever my people were. Next, the Emperor invited me to watch a strange ceremony. It was part of their way of choosing government officials. I learned that in Lilliput, people who want high jobs must perform tricks. The most important trick was dancing on a tight rope. A rope was tied 2 feet above the ground. The men had to jump and balance on it. The highest jumpers often won the job. It did not matter if they were smart or honest, only how well they could dance. One man named Flimnap jumped so high, he almost flew. He was already the Emperor's treasurer and was now more powerful than before. Another man fell from the rope and broke his arm. But nobody cared. The games were more important than the man's health. There was also a second type of test. The Emperor held a stick in his hand. The men had to crawl under it and then jump over it. The Emperor moved the stick higher and lower. The winners received colored ribbons. Red meant bravery. Blue meant wisdom. Green meant honesty. The winners tied the ribbons around their waist and showed them off with pride. Everyone cheered. One day, the Emperor asked me to hold the stick. I sat on the ground and lifted it high. 3 men came forward. They ran under and jumped over it while I laughed. It looked like a small game, but it was serious to them. Afterward, the Emperor said I had passed the test of trust. He gave me a new title, Nardak. It was the highest honor in Lilliput. Now, only the Emperor was above me. The people clapped when they saw me. Children ran up to wave. I bowed and thanked them. The Emperor told me more about Blefuscu, the enemy island. The war between the two countries had gone on for years. The reason, as I said before, was the egg law. People in Lilliput must break eggs at the small end. In Blefuscu, they still broke them at the big end. This argument had caused many wars. The last war had killed many people. Now, Blefuscu was planning to attack again. Their navy was ready. The Emperor of Lilliput asked me to help. I said I would help, but I did not want to kill anyone. I said I would try to stop the war without blood. The Emperor agreed. So I began to plan. I asked for strong rope and iron bars. The blacksmiths made them. Then I walked to the coast where the sea between Lilliput and Blefuscu was narrow. I waited until night. The sea was shallow for me. It reached only up to my waist. I could see the ships of Blefuscu far away. They were tied in a line near the shore. I swam quietly and reached them. I tied my ropes to the anchors of 50 ships. The men on the ships screamed and tried to shoot arrows at me. But I wore glasses to protect my eyes. Their arrows were like tiny needles. I felt no pain. I cut the ships loose and pulled them back to Lilliput. It was a strange sight, me walking through the water, pulling ships like toys. When I returned, the people cheered. The Emperor was so happy. He came out of the palace to meet me. He called me a hero. He gave me gifts and threw a big feast in my honor. But then he said something strange. He told me to return to Blefuscu and bring back the rest of the ships. He also wanted me to help conquer Blefuscu and make them his slaves. I was shocked. I said I could not do that. I said I came in peace and wanted to stop wars, not start them. The Emperor looked angry but said nothing. From that moment, I felt something had changed. Some ministers no longer smiled at me. Some looked at me with cold eyes. I had made enemies at court. Still, I was proud. I had stopped a war without killing anyone. I had saved Lilliput. But I did not yet understand the danger that was coming. Chapter 4. Some days after I brought the enemy ships to Lilliput, I saw a change in the emperor. At first, he was happy. He gave me new clothes and more titles. He even let me walk farther from the city. But soon, his face grew colder. He asked fewer questions. He spoke with me less. I could feel that he was not as pleased with me anymore. Why? Because I refused to help him conquer Blefuscu completely. He wanted me to go back, bring all their ships, and force their emperor to become a slave. But I said no. I told him I came in peace. I would protect Lilliput, but I would not help destroy another country. He hid his anger, but others did not. The treasurer, Flimnap, was jealous of me. He told the emperor lies. He said I was too proud. He said I cost too much to feed. The admiral, Skyresh Balgalam, hated me too. He was angry that I did not crush Blefuscu's fleet completely. Together, they began to plan against me. But I did not know this yet. Around that time, I asked the emperor for permission to visit Blefuscu. I said I only wanted to talk to their emperor and help make peace. The emperor was not happy. He said Blefuscu was still the enemy. But I promised not to help them in war. After a long talk, he agreed. So, I crossed the sea between the two islands. For me, it was a short walk in shallow water. The sea reached only to my knees. I carried my clothes and supplies on my head to keep them dry. When I came near Blefuscu, I saw people running away. They were afraid. I stood still and waved. I spoke kindly. Soon, some brave men came forward. They saw I meant no harm. I asked to meet their emperor. They sent a message to the palace. The emperor came out, dressed in gold and red. He looked serious but kind. He welcomed me and said I could stay in a large empty building outside the city. They gave me food and guards. I was free to walk near the city. The emperor of Blefuscu asked many questions. I told him what I knew about Lilliput and said I wanted peace between the two countries. He thanked me. He said he would send a message to Lilliput to talk about peace. While I stayed in Blefuscu, something strange happened. One morning, I walked along the shore and saw something floating in the sea. It looked like a big black box. As it came closer, I saw it was a real boat. It must have come from a shipwreck. I pulled it to shore. It was small for me, but still large enough to carry me across the sea. I was very happy. Now I had a way to return to England. I could build oars and a sail and leave when ready. But I said nothing to the Lilliputians or to Blefuscu's emperor yet. Just then, I received news. A friend from Lilliput, Reldressel, sent me a secret message. He warned me of danger. The emperor of Lilliput had changed. He listened to Flimnap and Skyresh. They wanted to punish me. They wrote articles of impeachment. That means they accused me of crimes. The crimes were refusing to destroy Blefuscu's fleet, planning to visit Blefuscu without full permission, speaking with Blefuscu's emperor, planning to return to my own country, not respecting the emperor enough. They wanted me to die. Some said I should be shot with poisoned arrows. Others said my house should be burned while I slept. But one minister said they should blind me instead. He said this was more merciful. They could tie me down and shoot arrows into my eyes. Then I would live, but never leave. The emperor agreed to this cruel plan. He signed the paper. The attack would happen in 3 days. I was shocked and hurt. I had helped Lilliput. I had protected them from war. And now they wanted to blind me or kill me. I felt sad and angry. I decided to escape. I went to the emperor of Blefuscu and told him everything. I asked for his protection. He said yes. He also gave me tools and wood to fix the boat I had found. I worked hard for several days. I made oars and a mast. I made a small cabin for food and water. The emperor of Blefuscu gave me bread, dried meat, barrels of fresh water and even a few small animals. He gave me a letter to take to the King of England. It explained who I was and how I helped both countries. The people of Blefuscu waved and cried. They had grown to like me. At last, I was ready. I waited for good weather. On the day I left, the wind was strong and fair. I stepped into the boat. I waved goodbye to the tiny people and sailed into the sea. I traveled for about 3 days. I saw no ships or land. I ate a little and drank water. I used the stars to guide me. On the 4th day, I saw a sail. It was a real English ship. I waved my shirt and shouted. They saw me. They came near and pulled me aboard. The captain and sailors were amazed. They asked me many questions. I told them some of my story. Most did not believe me. But when I showed them the tiny cows and sheep from Blefuscu, they were shocked. The captain gave me clothes and food. He said we were sailing to England. I was happy. After some weeks, we arrived. I went home to my wife and children. They were surprised to see me. I gave them the animals and told them stories. But in my heart, I still thought of Lilliput and Blefuscu. I remembered the little people, their cities, their wars, their kindness, their tricks, and I knew I would never forget them. Chapter 5. One morning, about 2 weeks after I returned from Blefuscu, something terrible happened. I was still staying in the old temple near the city of Moldendo. It was early, and I was sleeping peacefully. Suddenly, I woke up to the sound of people shouting and running. Outside, I saw smoke rising. Then I saw fire. The royal palace was burning. A strong wind made the flames grow quickly. People screamed and threw water from buckets, but the fire kept growing. The palace was made of wood and thin cloth, so it burned fast. The emperor's men came to me in great fear. They asked me to help. The fire was in the royal apartment of the empress. If I did not help, she might die, and the whole palace could be lost. I stood up quickly and looked at the palace. I was still half asleep. I had no water, no buckets, no tools. I could not bring water fast enough to stop the fire. Then I remembered something. Earlier that morning, I had drunk a large amount of wine. It made me feel full. Now, I used this in an unusual way. I stood over the palace wall and relieved myself. I did this carefully, aiming at the fire. The empress's rooms were burning the most, and I wanted to stop the flames before they spread. It worked. The fire hissed and went out. The people below clapped and shouted with joy. The emperor was thankful. He said I had saved the empress's life. The palace was damaged, but the most important rooms were safe. However, not everyone was happy. The empress was very angry. She said what I did was shameful, even if it saved her. She refused to live in the palace again. She moved to another building on the far side of the city. She never spoke to me again. Some lords and ladies also whispered against me. They said my act was disrespectful. They said I did not belong in Lilliput, that I was too big, too strange. I could feel a new kind of danger around me. People who once loved me now looked away when I passed. Even so, the emperor tried to act friendly. He gave me food and still allowed me to walk near the city. But he did not laugh as before. He did not invite me to games or ceremonies. I knew I had made powerful enemies. Then I learned something new. Flimnap, the treasurer, told the emperor that I had insulted his wife, the empress. He said I did it on purpose to shame her. This was a lie, of course. But the emperor listened. He was no longer sure if I was his friend or a danger. Reldressel, my friend from the court, came to warn me. He said the council had met in secret. They wrote a list of crimes against me. They called them articles of impeachment. They planned to arrest me and punish me. The list included these charges: putting out fire in a shameful way, refusing to crush Blefuscu and enslave its people, visiting Blefuscu without full royal permission, talking with the enemy king as an equal, planning to leave the country without saying goodbye. Some ministers wanted to kill me. Others said I should be blinded. They thought this would be enough to stop me from escaping or doing harm. The emperor agreed with the second plan. He said it was more merciful. They planned to shoot hundreds of arrows into my eyes while I slept. Then I would be blind but still alive. They thought I could still serve the kingdom by using my strength for heavy work. The emperor signed the order. The attack was planned for a few days later. I was shocked and hurt. I had done so much for Lilliput. I had saved the kingdom from war. I had shown mercy. And now, they wanted to take my sight. I thanked Reldressel and said goodbye. I knew I had to escape before the attack. That night, I left my house quietly. I took some food and walked across the fields to the coast. There, I hid in tall grass and waited for dawn. I looked at the sea and thought of the boat I had found near Blefuscu. I decided to go back. I would ask their emperor for help. Maybe I could use the boat to return to England. Maybe I could find peace again in my own country. I walked carefully through the shallow water between Lilliput and Blefuscu. The sea was calm. The stars above were bright. I reached the shore of Blefuscu by morning. The emperor of Blefuscu welcomed me. I told him everything. He was surprised and angry at the actions of Lilliput. He said I could stay as long as I wanted. I thanked him and promised to help if needed. Now, I had hope again. The boat I found was still there, hidden among the rocks. I began to prepare it for the long journey home. I gathered food, water, and supplies. The people of Blefuscu helped me. They gave me tools and cloth for sails. Soon, the boat was ready. I looked at the sea and thought of England. I knew it would be a hard journey. But I had escaped from danger, and now I had a chance to return home. Chapter 6. While I was still in Lilliput, I learned many things about the people and their way of life. They were small in size, but they had their own rules, laws, and customs. I listened carefully and asked many questions. The emperor gave me books written in their language, and my teachers helped me read them. The Lilliputians believed they were the most important people in the world. They thought their island was at the center of the earth. They called all other people barbarians. Their history books were full of stories about their great kings and wars. They believed they had the best system of government. Their laws were strict, but also strange. For example, lying and cheating in business were worse crimes than stealing. A man could steal food and only be whipped, but if he lied in court or cheated someone with money, he could be put to death. They said lying showed a bad heart and was more dangerous to society. Another law rewarded good behavior. If a person obeyed the law for 6 years and was honest and kind, he received money from the emperor and was called a model citizen. They believed people should be encouraged to do good, not only punished for doing bad. Children were raised very differently from what I knew. After they were 2 years old, they were sent to schools. The rich and poor went to different schools, but the rules were the same. Parents did not raise their children at home. Teachers trained them in honesty, courage, cleanliness, and respect for the law. Boys and girls were taught separately. Boys learned sports, reading, and public speaking. Girls learned how to care for others, how to sew, and how to manage a home. The poorest children worked part-time while they studied. They grew up to be strong and disciplined. The Lilliputians did not like long speeches. Their laws and public rules were written in very few words. If a law could not be explained in 22 words, it was not accepted. They believed people should understand the law easily. When a person applied for a government job, he was judged first on honesty, then on ability. A wise but dishonest man would not be hired. They said it was better to have an honest fool than a clever thief. Religion was also important in Lilliput. Most people believed in one great God. They said he watched their hearts, not just their actions. They believed people who did good would live forever in happiness. Evil people would be punished after death. There were 2 big political parties in Lilliput. They were called the High Heels and the Low Heels. The names came from the kind of shoes they wore. The High Heels believed in the old traditions. The Low Heels wanted change and new laws. The emperor supported the Low Heels. He said they were more modern and peaceful. But many people still loved the High Heels. The fights between these 2 groups caused much trouble. Sometimes they even came close to civil war. The emperor's son, the heir to the throne, wore one high heel and one low heel. This was his way of staying neutral. But people noticed he walked with a limp. Some said it showed that he could not be trusted by either side. Another great issue was the fight with Blefuscu. As I mentioned before, the war began over a question of religion. Many years ago, an old emperor of Lilliput ordered that people must break their eggs at the small end. This became a law after the emperor's son cut his finger while breaking an egg at the big end. The law caused anger. Many people loved the old way. They said their holy books taught to break eggs at the big end. They refused to follow the new rule. Some were punished. Some rebelled. Many escaped to Blefuscu, where the big end rule was still allowed. Now, the 2 countries hated each other. 6 wars had been fought over the egg law. Thousands had died. Many ships were lost. Both sides wrote books and poems to prove their side was right. The people of Blefuscu also believed in one God. Their religion was much like that of Lilliput, but they had different customs. Their rulers believed in peace and had sent messages asking to stop the war. But the emperor of Lilliput refused. After I captured the ships of Blefuscu and brought them to Lilliput, I hoped there would be peace. But the emperor of Lilliput wanted more. He wanted me to destroy Blefuscu completely. He wanted to send his army across the sea and make them slaves. I said no. I told him I had done enough. I said I wanted peace and would not help in such cruelty. The emperor looked at me with cold eyes. He said nothing. From that day, his attitude changed. He began to listen more to the people who hated me. I also learned something interesting about Lilliput's way of punishing criminals. When a man was found guilty of a crime, he was not only punished, his whole family could suffer too. His house was destroyed. His land was taken. His children were made servants. But if a man was innocent, and someone accused him falsely, the liar was punished very harshly. The Lilliputians believed it was terrible to destroy another person's good name. Sometimes, if a criminal begged for mercy and promised to change, the emperor could forgive him. But this happened only if the man had friends at court or if his crime was small. As I stayed longer in Lilliput, I saw more of their life. The people were not evil, but they were proud and often narrow-minded. They believed they were better than all others. They laughed at my country's customs and said we were foolish. I tried to explain, but they only shook their heads. I was a giant to them in body, but in their eyes, they thought they were giants in wisdom. Still, I listened and watched. I wanted to learn as much as I could before my time in Lilliput ended. Chapter 7. As time passed, I saw more signs that the emperor and his court no longer trusted me. I had refused to help destroy Blefuscu. I had put out the palace fire in a way that some called shameful. I had become too popular with the people. And some important men, like Flimnap and Skyresh Balgalam, feared that I might become more powerful than they were. My friend Reldressel warned me again. He told me that secret meetings were held every day. The council was preparing to punish me. He explained that I had been accused of high crimes against the state. These were serious charges. Here were the main crimes they said I had committed. I refused to destroy Blefuscu completely. I visited Blefuscu without asking the emperor. I talked with the Blefuscu emperor as an equal. I planned to return to my own country. I put out the fire in the royal palace in an offensive way. Reldressel told me the emperor had agreed to punish me. Some wanted me executed. Others wanted me blinded. The final plan was to blind me by shooting hundreds of tiny arrows into my eyes while I slept. After that, they would give me small amounts of food each day so I would become weak. Over time, I would die slowly from hunger. This way, they would not have to deal with my body all at once. I was shocked. I had helped this country in many ways. I had saved them from invasion. I had shown mercy. I had lived peacefully among them. And now, they were planning to blind me and let me die. Reldressel said the attack would happen in 3 days. I thanked him with all my heart. Then I made a plan to escape. That night, when the moon was bright, I quietly left my house. I walked slowly through the fields toward the coast. I moved carefully, so no one would hear me. I still wore the chain around my ankle, but it had been loosened earlier, so I could remove it. When I reached the shore, I looked across the sea. The island of Blefuscu was not far away. I waited until the tide was low. Then I stepped into the water and walked. The sea reached only up to my chest. I carried a small bag with bread, meat, and water. After about an hour, I reached the shore of Blefuscu. The guards were surprised to see me. I told them I came in peace and asked to speak with their emperor. They led me to him. The emperor of Blefuscu was kind. I told him everything, the lies of the Lilliputians, the plans to blind me, and my escape. He was shocked and promised to protect me. He said I could stay in Blefuscu as long as I liked. He gave me a house near the coast and servants to help me. 3 days later, the emperor of Lilliput sent a message to Blefuscu. He demanded that I be returned in chains. He said I was a traitor and must be punished. The emperor of Blefuscu sent back a polite answer. He said I was under his protection. He said he would not send me back. The emperor of Lilliput was angry. He promised war. But Blefuscu was ready to defend itself, and I was there to help if needed. While I stayed in Blefuscu, I remembered the small boat I had seen floating near the coast earlier. It had come from a shipwreck and was now hidden among the rocks. I asked the emperor if I could use it to return home. He said yes. I worked every day to fix the boat. I used strong cloth for sails and cut oars from nearby trees. The emperor gave me carpenters to help. We filled the boat with food and water. I also took some small animals, cows, sheep, and chickens, to show people in England. The emperor gave me a letter for the King of England. It explained how I had helped both Lilliput and Blefuscu. It asked that I be treated with honor and kindness. Before I left, many people came to say goodbye. They had grown to like me. Some cried. Some brought gifts. I thanked them all. On the morning of my departure, the sea was calm. I stepped into the boat. The emperor and his court stood on the shore and waved. I waved back and began my journey. The wind was strong and carried me far. For many hours, I sailed across the open sea. I saw no land. The sun shone bright. I ate a little and drank water. On the third day, I saw a ship in the distance. I raised my white shirt as a signal. They saw me and changed direction. Soon, the ship came close. The sailors helped me aboard. The captain was kind. He asked me many questions. I told him some of my story. He laughed and said it sounded like a fairy tale. I showed him the tiny animals I brought with me. He was amazed. The ship was headed to England. I was lucky. I spent the rest of the journey telling the crew about my adventure. Most did not believe me, but they enjoyed my tales. After a few weeks, we reached England. I went home to my wife and children. They were happy and surprised. I gave them the animals and told them everything. At first, people laughed at my story. But when they saw the tiny cows and sheep, they began to wonder. Some scientists came to see them. They asked questions and wrote reports. Soon, people all over the country talked about my travels. But I stayed quiet. I missed the little people, even those who betrayed me. I kept the small things I had taken from Lilliput, a red ribbon, a tiny chair, a gold coin, and I remembered my days as a giant in a land of tiny men. Chapter 8. After I settled in Blefuscu, I felt more peace. The people were friendly, and their emperor treated me with great respect. I had escaped the danger in Lilliput, and now I only wanted to find a way back to England. While walking near the sea one day, I saw something far out on the water. It looked like a black dot. I watched it closely. As it came closer, I saw it was a small boat. The boat seemed empty. Maybe it came from a shipwreck. I hoped it would be strong enough to carry me across the ocean. I ran into the water, pulled the boat to shore, and checked its condition. It was old, but it floated well. Some of the boards were loose, but with time and care, I could repair it. I went to the Emperor of Blefuscu and asked for help. He kindly agreed. He gave me wood, tools, and workers. I worked hard every day. We fixed the boat, built new oars, and added a sail made from strong cloth. The Emperor gave me food for the journey. I packed bread, dry meat, cheese, barrels of clean water, and bottles of wine. I also took some small animals from Blefuscu, 6 cows, 2 bulls, 6 sheep, 2 rams, and several birds. I made small cages to keep them safe during the trip. These animals were a gift from the Emperor. He said they would prove my story when I returned to my country. He also gave me a letter for the King of England, explaining who I was and what I had done in both Lilliput and Blefuscu. The people of Blefuscu were sad to see me go. They brought gifts and wished me luck. I thanked them all. The Emperor himself walked with me to the shore. He gave me a beautiful ring with his royal seal. He said I could show it to any ruler in the world, and they would know I was a friend of Blefuscu. The weather was good. The wind blew gently. I climbed into the boat and pushed away from the shore. I waved goodbye as the people of Blefuscu grew smaller behind me. Then I looked ahead toward the open sea. I sailed for several days. The sea was calm at first. I used the stars and sun to guide me. I ate little and drank carefully to save supplies. I stayed awake most nights, watching the waves and hoping to see a ship. On the third day, I saw a sail on the horizon. I waved my hat and shouted. As the ship came closer, I raised my white shirt to signal peace. The ship turned and sailed toward me. Soon, the sailors pulled me aboard. They were amazed to see a man alone in a small boat in the middle of the ocean. The captain asked where I came from. I told him I had been shipwrecked and had survived on a deserted island. I did not tell the full truth. No one would believe me yet. The captain was kind. He gave me dry clothes, food, and a clean bed. I thanked him. Over the next days, we became friends. I told him more of my story. At first, he laughed, but when I showed him the tiny animals from Blefuscu, he believed me. He said he had never seen anything like them. The ship was from England and headed home. I was lucky. We reached the English coast after a few weeks. I stepped off the ship and kissed the ground. I had returned home after many months. I went straight to my house. My wife and children cried when they saw me. They had thought I was dead. I told them I had survived, but I did not tell them everything at once. I showed them the tiny animals. They were shocked and amazed. Soon, news spread. People from all over the city came to see the small cows and sheep. Doctors and scientists examined them. They said the animals were real. Some men offered me large sums of money to sell them, but I refused. I wanted to keep them as proof of my journey. Later, I told my full story to a few close friends. Some believed me. Others thought I was joking. I didn't care. I knew what I had seen. I had walked in a land of tiny people. I had helped one kingdom and escaped another. I had learned much about power, pride, and politics. I promised myself I would never travel again. I had faced storms, war, betrayal, and great danger. I had almost lost my life. Now, I wanted peace. But as time passed, I felt restless again. I missed the sea. I missed discovering new lands. And deep inside, I wondered, if such tiny people exist, what other wonders are still out there? One day, I looked at the little cows grazing in my garden. I thought of the Emperor of Lilliput and the Emperor of Blefuscu. I thought of the rope dancers, the egg laws, the proud ministers, and the strange justice system. I thought of the kindness of Reldressel and the betrayal by Flimnap. And then I knew, my adventures were not over yet. Part 2, A Voyage to Brobdingnag. Chapter 1. After spending some time with my family in England, I again felt the desire to travel. I loved the sea and the adventure it brought. So in the year 1702, I joined a merchant ship called the Adventure. We left England and sailed toward India. Our journey started well. We stopped at many ports and traded goods. But after a few months, near the island of Van Diemen's Land, now called Tasmania, we faced bad weather. Strong winds pushed us far from our path. We were lost at sea. After some time, we saw land in the distance. The captain sent out a small boat with 12 men, including me, to explore the shore. We were looking for fresh water and food. The rest of the crew stayed on the ship. When we reached the shore, we walked inland. The ground was flat, the grass thick and high. But something felt strange. As we walked farther, the others suddenly shouted. I turned and saw a huge creature walking toward us. It was a giant man, taller than a church tower. My companions ran in fear. I ran too, but in another direction. I hid in the tall grass and watched the giant. He wore clothes made of thick animal skins. His shoes were bigger than my whole body. He looked around but didn't see me. Then he walked away. Shaking with fear, I hid in the grass for a long time. At last, I stood up and looked around. I was alone. My friends had returned to the boat and gone back to the ship. I could see the ship far away in the sea. It was sailing away. I was left behind. I had no food, no water, and no idea where I was. I felt hopeless. I climbed a small hill to look around. What I saw frightened me more. Everything was giant-sized. The trees were tall as towers. The grass grew higher than my head. Birds flew above that looked like dragons. I walked for some time, staying hidden in the grass. Then I saw something that gave me hope. In the distance, I saw a field with workers. They looked like men, but each was at least 60 feet tall. They were using tools as big as boats to cut the wheat. A giant boy saw me and shouted. One of the workers came and looked at me with surprise. He picked me up gently and placed me in his pocket. I could not move. He walked to a small house, small for him, but huge for me. He showed me to others inside. They were all giants too. They looked at me as if I were a strange animal. I was afraid they might crush me. But they treated me kindly. The worker showed me to his master, a farmer. The farmer's face was rough, but not cruel. He looked at me with interest. The farmer placed me on a table and asked me something. I could not understand his language. So I bowed and tried to show respect. I pointed to my mouth to ask for food. The farmer laughed and called for his wife. She came and gave me a crumb of bread, crumb for her, but a full meal for me. She gave me a thimble of milk, which I drank like a bowl. I thanked her. Then their young daughter came in. She was about 9 years old but still much taller than me. She looked at me with gentle eyes. She cleaned my clothes and gave me new food. I started to feel safe. They called in their neighbors to see me. Soon, I was passed from hand to hand like a toy. One giant sneezed on me. Another poked me too hard. I was scared and tired. The little girl, though she was huge to me, took me back and placed me in her own room. She gave me a soft bed made of her doll's blanket. I fell asleep right away. I was exhausted from fear and walking. The next day, the farmer had an idea. He would take me to the market and show me to the public. People would pay to see the tiny man. He made a small box for me to ride in. It had windows and a door. The girl, whose name was Glundleclich, came with us. She carried the box on a pillow. At the market, people came from all over to see me. I stood on a table and bowed. I waved. I danced a little. I drew pictures with a tiny stick. The people were amazed. They had never seen anything like me. The farmer made good money. He decided to travel around the country and show me in different towns. I was not happy about this. I felt like a prisoner. But Glumdalclitch stayed with me and took care of me. She was kind and gentle. She made clothes for me from fine cloth. She cleaned my box every day. I called her my nurse. Still, the traveling was hard. The roads were bumpy. The crowds were loud. The farmer pushed me to perform every day. He only cared about the money. I began to feel weak and sick. I had no rest. But Glumdalclitch cared for me like a mother. She gave me medicine and warm milk. She held me in her hands and sang softly. Without her, I might have died. One day, we arrived at the capital city of this land, which was called Brobdingnag. The farmer planned to show me to the king. That visit would change everything. Chapter 2. When we arrived at the capital city of Brobdingnag, the farmer told people he had something amazing to show. Soon, word spread that a tiny man had come to town. The queen heard about me and sent a message. She wanted to see me in the palace. The farmer dressed me in my best clothes. Glumdalclitch cleaned my box and carried me carefully. We were brought to the palace. The queen was sitting in a large chair. She looked kind but serious. She asked the farmer to show what I could do. I stepped out of the box and walked across a table. I bowed low. I waved and smiled. Then I drew a small picture using a toothpick and some berry juice. The queen clapped her hands and laughed. She had never seen anything so curious. She asked me questions, but I didn't understand her well. Still, I used signs and simple words. I pointed to the farmer and then to myself to show that he was my owner. The queen looked at the farmer and asked how he got me. He told her I was found in his field. The queen asked Glumdalclitch if I was happy. Glumdalclitch shook her head. She said I was tired and weak. She said the farmer made me work too much and did not give me enough rest. The queen's face changed. She looked angry. She turned to the king and asked what to do. The king, who had come in quietly, watched me with great interest. He said the court should keep me and care for me. He offered the farmer a large sum of gold. The farmer agreed at once. So I was no longer a traveling show. I was now a member of the royal court of Brobdingnag. The queen ordered a special apartment to be made for me inside the palace. It was built from fine wood and glass. It had a table, a chair, a bed, and shelves. All were sized for me. Glumdalclitch stayed with me as my nurse. The queen said she had done a good job and must remain with me. Glumdalclitch was very happy. She called me her little man. She made new clothes for me and kept everything clean. The queen gave orders that only gentle people could visit me. No one was allowed to poke or touch me. I now had servants and guards. I ate meals with the queen. My plate was a large walnut shell. My fork and spoon were made of silver. Each day, nobles came to ask me questions. I told them about England and our customs. They laughed at some of our ways, but they listened carefully. I said we were not giants in size, but we had great inventions. I spoke of ships, books, clocks, and tools. One day, the king asked me about my country's government. I explained that we had a parliament, made of men who made laws. I said we had two groups, lords and commons, and that the king ruled with their advice. I said the people were free and proud. The king listened but then laughed. He said my country sounded full of lies and tricks. He said we had too many lawyers and that our leaders were chosen for money, not wisdom. He said we were fools for fighting wars over land and money. I was hurt by his words, but I could not argue. His land was peaceful and honest. His people worked hard and lived simply. There was little crime. Everyone obeyed the laws. The king ruled with fairness and kindness. At the same time, life in Brobdingnag was not easy for me. I was so small that danger was everywhere. Once, I was walking in the garden when a dog ran toward me. It thought I was a toy. It grabbed me in its mouth and ran. Luckily, the dog dropped me when Glumdalclitch called. I was shaken but not hurt. Another time, a monkey got into my room. It picked me up and climbed to the top of a shelf. I shouted and kicked. Glumdalclitch came just in time. She climbed a ladder and rescued me. After that, extra guards were placed outside my door. The weather was also a danger. A small breeze to the Brobdingnagians was a strong wind to me. A drop of rain was like a bucket of water. Once, I was caught in a light shower and nearly drowned. I learned to stay indoors during storms. The queen made sure I had all I needed. She asked me what food I liked. She told the cooks to prepare tiny portions. They even baked small loaves of bread for me. I missed English food, but I was grateful. Glumdalclitch taught me more of the Brobdingnag language. Soon, I could speak it well. I talked with the Queen and King every day. They were kind and patient. They asked about my travels and the places I had seen. I began to write a little book in their language. It told the story of my life and my adventures in Lilliput. The Queen asked for a copy to keep in her library. The King said I should write more. Despite the kindness of the royal family, I still felt lonely. I was the only person of my size in the land. I had no one to talk to who truly understood me. Glumdalclitch was my friend, but she was a child. I sometimes dreamed of England and wished to return. Still, I was safe and cared for. I had gone from a traveling show to a palace guest. I had seen two opposite worlds, one where I was a giant, and one where I was small as a toy. I did not know what adventure would come next. But I was ready for whatever it might be. Chapter 3. Now that I lived in the royal palace of Brobdingnag, I spent much time talking with the king. He liked to ask me about England. He was curious about our people, our laws, and our way of life. He listened carefully and often asked clever questions. One day, he asked me to describe how our government worked. I began by explaining the structure of England's monarchy and parliament. I said we had a king, like him, but that we also had elected leaders. I spoke about the House of Commons and the House of Lords. I said our judges made sure laws were followed and that no one was above the law. He asked how leaders were chosen. I explained that some were born into power, but many were chosen by elections. I told him the people voted for their representatives. I said our courts protected the weak and punished the guilty. I was proud of my country and tried to explain its strengths. But the king was not impressed. He asked, how can the people choose good leaders if most of them are poor and uneducated? Won't they be tricked by lies? I tried to answer. I said we had newspapers and books, and people could learn about politics. But the king shook his head. He said, in my country, we choose leaders for their honesty and wisdom. We do not let liars or fools rule. And we never fight wars unless we must defend ourselves. Then he asked about our wars. I told him England had fought many wars, for land, for money, or for power. Sometimes we fought to protect our allies. I said war was terrible but sometimes necessary. The king was shocked. He said, you fight to protect your allies? You send young men to die so someone else can keep their land? I had no good answer. He continued asking questions. How do you keep peace in your cities? He asked. I said we had police and judges. But I also told him we had thieves, cheats, and murderers. I said we had prisons and punishments. He said, then your laws are not strong enough. In my kingdom, people respect the law. They fear shame more than pain. We have little need for prisons. The king asked about money. I explained banks, loans, taxes, and trade. I told him some people were rich, others poor. He asked how the rich got their money. I said some were born into wealth, others worked for it. He looked sad. And the poor? He asked. I said the poor worked hard but often remained poor. He shook his head. That is not right, he said. A good government should care for all its people. Then I told him about lawyers. I explained how people went to court to solve disputes. I said lawyers helped them. He asked how many years lawyers studied before they began working. I said 7. He laughed. 7 years to learn how to twist words and confuse people. I said lawyers helped find justice. He said, it sounds like they help the rich win and the poor lose. The king continued to question me day after day. I told him more about England's history, our great writers, our explorers, our scientists. He listened, but always looked doubtful. Finally, he said, from what you tell me, your people are clever but not wise. You use your brains to make weapons and play tricks. You say you love peace, but you fight often. You say you value freedom, but many are poor and helpless. You are proud of your system, but I see only greed and pride. These words hurt me. I had always loved my country. I wanted the king to admire it, but I could not deny the truth in his words. Still, I said, Your Majesty, we have our faults, but we also have greatness. We have art, music, books, discoveries. We try to improve. We try to be better. He nodded kindly. That is good. But be careful. Power without wisdom is dangerous. After these talks, I began to think more deeply about my own country. I remembered some things I had ignored before. I remembered how some leaders cared more for money than for people. I remembered how innocent men were punished, and guilty ones set free. I saw my land in a new light. In Brobdingnag, I was like a toy, but I felt respected. The people were honest, their laws were fair, and their king was wise. There were no wars, no spies, no rich or poor extremes. It was a simple land, but a strong one. One day, I asked the king if he would like to visit England. He smiled and said no. He said, "I am too old to travel, and I do not think I would enjoy your world. I like mine." I could not blame him. I continued to live at the palace, learning more each day. I wrote notes and stories. I watched how people lived. I admired the beauty of the land and the peace of its cities. Glumdalclitch stayed by my side. She helped me understand their customs. She also asked me many questions about England. She loved to hear about the small houses, tiny horses, and little rivers of my world. I missed my home, but I was learning. And with each passing day, I saw more clearly what was good and what was wrong, both in their land and mine. Chapter 4. Although I lived comfortably at the royal palace, life in Brobdingnag was not always safe. Because I was so small, many things could hurt me, even things that were not dangerous to the giant people. I had to be careful every day. Glumdalclitch, my nurse and friend, always watched over me. She carried me in a little wooden box lined with soft cloth. It had a door, windows with curtains, and tiny furniture inside. She called it my travel house. When we went out, she carried the box on a pillow to keep it steady. One day, the queen invited Glumdalclitch to a royal party. She wanted to show her to other noble ladies. I was placed in my travel box and set on a table near the window in another room. A servant was told to watch me. But the servant left the room. I was alone. Suddenly, a huge animal jumped up to the table. It was a monkey. It looked at me, curious. Then it opened the door of the box and reached inside. I screamed and tried to hide. The monkey grabbed me and held me like a baby. It fed me with chewed-up food and made strange noises. I was terrified. I shouted for help, but no one came. The monkey climbed to the top of a tall cabinet with me in its arms. I kicked and struggled, but it was too strong. Finally, Glumdalclitch returned and saw what had happened. She screamed. Guards and servants ran in. One of them threw a shoe at the monkey, and it dropped me. Luckily, I landed on a soft cloth. I was shaken and bruised, but not seriously hurt. Glumdalclitch cried and held me gently. The queen came and was angry with the servant who left me alone. She ordered that no animal should ever be allowed near me again. Another time, I was walking in the palace garden. A bird, thinking I was a bug or worm, flew down and tried to grab me. I shouted, and Glumdalclitch waved her hand to scare it away. After that, I was more careful outdoors. Even food could be dangerous. One day, I ate a piece of fruit and found a worm inside. It was bigger than my arm. I dropped the fruit and ran. In my country, a worm like that would be tiny, but here, it was like a snake. When I sat at the royal table, I saw other strange things. The queen and her ladies were kind and polite, but they were so large that even normal action seemed scary. When they sneezed, it was like thunder. When they ate, the noise was loud, and I could see their food up close, chewed meat, bits of bread, and sauce. It was not pleasant. Even the smells were strong. Their breath and perfumes, which they liked, were too much for me. I often sat far away on my little table, with my own plate and cup. Still, I tried to be brave. I wanted to understand their world, even if it was strange and sometimes scary. I knew they meant no harm. It was just the difference in our size that made their world dangerous for me. To keep me safe, the queen asked for a special chair and table to be made for me. They were placed on her dining table, so I could sit and eat without risk. I was also given a small sword to carry. It was only for show, but I liked it. Glumdalclitch made me new clothes from fine silk. She also made me shoes and a warm coat for cold days. She treated me like a doll and a little brother at the same time. I began to explore more of the palace. The queen allowed me to visit the library. The books were huge. One page was like a wall. I climbed onto the table and walked across the words, reading as I went. The king asked if I could write in their language. I said yes. He gave me a large pen made of a goose feather. The ink was in a bowl the size of a bathtub. I dipped the pen and tried to write, but it was very hard. The pen was too heavy. So instead, I used a small stick and black paint. I wrote stories and poems in their language. I wrote about my travels in Lilliput. The queen enjoyed reading my work. She asked me to write more. One day, I asked the king if he wanted to hear how I traveled across the sea. He said yes. I told him about ships, sails, and navigation. I described our navy and the size of our warships. He was amazed. He asked, "Do your little people really build ships that cross oceans?" "Yes," I said. "We have ships with guns, and we fight great battles at sea." The king shook his head. "Why do you fight so much?" I said, "For trade, for land, for honor." He replied, "That is not wisdom. It is madness." Then I told him we had invented gunpowder. I explained how it worked and how it was used in war. I offered to show him how to make it. I said it could help protect his kingdom. But the king grew angry. He said, "No. I do not want such evil things in my land. We do not need powder to kill. We live in peace." I tried to say it was only for defense, but he stopped me. "Your people are clever," he said, "but not wise. You use your minds to destroy, not to build. I would rather lose my throne than see powder in Brobdingnag." I was ashamed. I had thought he would be impressed. But now I saw his wisdom. He cared more for peace than for power. From that day, I never spoke of war again. I still loved my country, but I began to see it with new eyes. Maybe the king was right. Maybe we needed to learn from people like him. Chapter 5. Although I lived safely in the palace, danger was never far away because of my tiny size. Even small accidents could have killed me. Some of these moments were frightening, while others were simply strange. Let me tell you about a few. One day, Glumdalclitch took me to visit the royal garden. It was a beautiful place with flowers, trees, and neat paths. Glumdalclitch placed me on the ground and went to pick flowers for me. I walked a little on my own and found a patch of soft grass. Suddenly, I heard a buzzing sound. I looked up and saw a group of bees flying toward me. In Brobdingnag, bees were as large as birds. I tried to run, but one of them flew at me and struck my face with its stinger. Luckily, I had my tiny sword with me. I drew it and fought like a knight. I stabbed 2 of the bees and ran away. When Glumdalclitch returned, she saw I was out of breath and had some blood on my hand. She gently cleaned my wounds and was very proud that I had fought the bees like a brave soldier. I later saved the dead bees, dried their bodies, and brought them back to England to show scientists. They were amazed by their size. Another time, I was sitting at my little table eating dinner, when a servant dropped a large bowl of cream. It landed next to me and splashed everywhere. The cream hit my face, clothes, and food. I was covered in it. Everyone laughed, and Glumdalclitch quickly wiped me clean. One evening, I was resting in my travel box. The Queen had taken us on a trip to the seaside. She wanted to enjoy the fresh air and the view of the ocean. While she sat with her ladies, my box was placed on the sand near a cliff. Glumdalclitch went a little way off to pick some sea plants. Suddenly, a strong wind blew from the sea. It lifted my box off the ground and pushed it over the edge of the cliff. I was trapped inside, rolling and shaking. Then, I felt the box fall into the sea. Water rushed in through the windows. I shouted for help, but no one could hear me. The box rocked back and forth with the waves. I thought I would die. Luckily, the box was tightly built and floated like a boat. I had a little food and drink inside, so I waited and hoped. After some time, the wind and waves pushed me far from the shore. Then I heard a strange sound, a voice. It was loud and deep. I looked through the window and saw a ship. It was not a Brobdingnagian ship. It was a normal English ship, like the ones I had sailed on before. The sailors saw my box floating in the sea. They threw ropes and pulled it aboard. When they opened the door and saw me inside, they were shocked. I was a small man in strange clothes, inside a little house. The captain asked who I was and where I came from. I tried to explain, but my voice was weak. They gave me food and clothes. I slowly began to feel better. After I rested, I told them my story. Most of the sailors laughed and said it was a dream. But the captain listened carefully. When I showed him the giant bee stingers and some clothes made from Brobdingnag silk, he began to believe. I asked what part of the world we were in. The captain said we were near the coast of California, on the west side of the Americas. I could not understand how I had traveled so far in my box. Maybe the winds and waves had carried me a great distance. The captain said they were heading back to England. I was happy. I wanted to return home and see my family. During the trip, I wrote down everything I could remember about Brobdingnag, its people, land, animals, and customs. I wanted to tell my story clearly when I arrived. We reached England safely. I went home and hugged my wife and children. They were surprised to see me. They thought I was lost at sea. I showed them the small clothes, the tools, and the bee stingers. They listened to my story and looked at the strange things I brought back. But over time, I noticed something in myself. After living in a land where everyone was a giant, I began to feel strange among normal-sized people. Everything seemed small and weak. The tallest man looked short to me. The biggest horse seemed tiny. I had to remind myself that I was back in my own world. For many weeks, I dreamed of BROBDINGNAG. I missed GLUBBDUBDRIB. She had cared for me like a sister. I missed the queen, the garden, and even the bee I fought. I thought of how kind and honest the BROBDINGNAGians were. Their simple life seemed better than the tricks and lies I saw around me in England. Even though I was home, my heart was still far away. I had been a little man in a land of giants, but those giants had great hearts. They had taught me lessons about honor, peace, and truth. And so, I promised myself to live with the wisdom I had learned there. I would speak honestly, act kindly, and never use my knowledge for harm. But I also knew this: the world is full of strange lands and surprising people. And perhaps, one day, I would sail again. Chapter 6. After I returned to England from BROBDINGNAG, many people asked me to tell them about that strange land. So I wrote down everything I remembered: how the people looked, how they lived, what they believed, and how they treated me. I wanted to describe the country clearly. The first thing to understand is that BROBDINGNAG was a land of giants. Most men there were about 60 feet tall. Women were the same. Animals, birds, and even insects were huge compared to those in England. Because of their great size, the world there was different. A small tree in their country was taller than the biggest building in mine. A normal apple was as big as a man's head. A field mouse looked like a large dog. A cat could kill me easily. Still, their world worked much like ours. They planted crops, raised animals, built houses, and followed laws. Their homes were not fancy, but very strong. Their tools were large and well made. Their books were big, each page like a carpet to me. The BROBDINGNAGians were healthy people. They ate plain food, meat, bread, cheese, and vegetables. They didn't use much spice or sauce. They drank water, milk, and light wine. They hated drunkenness and punished those who got drunk. Their clothes were simple but neat. They used strong cloth and wore clean shirts and coats. They didn't follow fashion like we do in England. They didn't paint their faces or wear tall wigs. They didn't care much for dancing or fancy parties. They said such things were childish. Their language was soft and easy to learn. GLUBBDUBDRIB helped me, and soon I could speak well. Their grammar was simple. They had only one word for each idea. They didn't like long speeches. They said truth was better than clever talk. The laws in BROBDINGNAG were fair and clear. If a man broke the law, he was punished quickly. There were few lawyers. People said the law should be easy to understand. If a man couldn't explain the law in simple words, it wasn't a good law. They also believed in kindness. When someone was poor or sick, others helped him. There were no beggars. The government gave food and shelter to those who needed it. They believed all people had value, no matter how rich or poor. Children in BROBDINGNAG were raised with care. Parents taught them honesty and hard work. Boys learned farming, building, or writing. Girls learned cooking, sewing, and medicine. They started school at 5 and worked by 12. All children were taught to respect their elders. Their rulers were chosen for wisdom, not for birth or money. The king and queen were good people who loved peace. They ruled with fairness and mercy. They hated war and never attacked other countries. They believed it was better to live quietly than to seek power. The king once told me, "If my people have food, homes, and peace, why should I want more?" I thought that was very wise. In BROBDINGNAG, I was treated kindly, but I also saw my own country through new eyes. When I described our wars, the king shook his head. When I explained how men in England made money by cheating others, he looked sad. When I told him about lawyers, he laughed and said, "You use lies to find truth." I could not argue. I saw that the BROBDINGNAGians had simpler lives, but they were more honest and peaceful. They didn't care for gold or jewels. They valued kindness more than wealth. They believed a small house filled with love was better than a big one filled with pride. At first, I had thought them dull and simple. But over time, I began to admire them. They didn't trick each other. They didn't start wars or seek revenge. They didn't judge people by how they looked or dressed. They judged by character and actions. The king once asked me, "Why do your people fight so much?" I answered, "For power, for land, and sometimes for religion." He said, "Then your people are mad." He wasn't being cruel. He just didn't understand why humans would hurt each other when they could live in peace. I didn't have a good answer. One thing I noticed in Brobdingnag was that sickness was rare. People lived long and strong lives. They didn't eat too much. They worked with their hands. They went to bed early and woke with the sun. Their doctors gave simple medicine, herbs and plants. They didn't trust strange cures or tricks. The land itself was rich. The soil was good for farming. Rivers gave water. Hills gave wood and stone. There were no wild animals that harmed people. There were no earthquakes or storms. The people said their land was blessed by nature. There were no thieves. People didn't lock their doors. They said, "If I don't want what is yours, why would I steal it?" And since they helped each other, no one needed to steal. I once asked the queen why they didn't have theaters or circuses. She said, "We don't need people to pretend. We enjoy real life." They liked music and singing, but they didn't care for actors or shows. In Brobdingnag, I saw that happiness comes not from wealth, noise, or clever talk, but from peace, honesty, and kindness. I had lived in a land of little people, and now in a land of giants. And yet, it was not size that made a people great. It was their heart. When I returned to England, I remembered all this. I told people about Brobdingnag. Many laughed or didn't believe me. But I didn't care. I knew what I had seen. And I hoped we might one day learn to live with such wisdom. Chapter 7. In the palace of Brobdingnag, my days were peaceful but sometimes difficult. I was treated well by the royal family and the servants. Glumdalclitch cared for me as lovingly as ever. But I still longed for home. I missed England, my wife, my house, my books, my normal-sized life. One day, I had a chance to speak privately with the king. He had listened to many of my stories about Europe, our politics, our wars, our leaders, and our inventions. He asked me again about war. I explained how we trained soldiers, built ships and cannons, and made gunpowder to protect our nation. He looked at me with surprise. "You say you can destroy a city from far away? That you can kill thousands with a single weapon?" I said, "Yes, Your Majesty, it is true. But we use these things for defense." The king stood up and said loudly, "I cannot believe such cruelty exists in a land of men your size. You are like insects, yet you build tools to destroy each other." I said, "We are not cruel, but we must be strong." He shook his head. "You use your mind not for wisdom, but for destruction. If someone brought such a terrible invention to Brobdingnag, I would have him executed at once." I bowed and said no more. I could see that he was angry, not at me, but at the idea that men used their intelligence for war. He said my people had clever hands but foolish hearts. Another time, I spoke to him about our laws and leaders. I told him how some leaders in England gained power not because they were wise, but because they were rich or born into noble families. I said many men in power thought only of their own success. The king replied, "Then your country is run by pride and gold, not wisdom and justice." I had no answer. I felt ashamed. I loved my country, but I could not deny what he said. Still, I tried to show him that England also had good people, brave sailors, honest farmers, kind doctors, and hard-working families. I said not everyone was greedy or foolish. He nodded and said, "Then I hope your people will learn to follow those good men instead of their rich masters." In the palace, many people came to see me. I was famous across the land. Ministers, scholars, and even travelers from far villages visited. Some came to ask questions. Others just wanted to see the little man who spoke the language and lived in a box. Some were kind, but others made jokes about my size. They laughed when I walked or spoke. I did not like this, but I stayed polite. I knew I was different, and most people meant no harm. Still, I sometimes grew tired of being stared at. I missed being normal. In England, I was just another man. In Brobdingnag, I was a strange toy or pet. Glumdalclitch noticed this. She tried to cheer me up. She made me new clothes, told me stories, and played music. She was truly my best friend. One day, a small accident reminded me again how dangerous life could be. I was eating at a table when a cat jumped up. It was huge, bigger than a lion in my world. It stared at me with shining eyes and moved closer. I froze. I didn't dare move. Then I remembered something from home: never show fear to a cat. So I stood up slowly, looked the cat in the eyes, and walked toward it. The cat blinked, then turned and jumped down. I sat back down and shook. Glumdalclitch came running and scolded the servants for not watching the door. Another danger came from a baby. One of the queen's ladies had a child who had never seen me. She brought him to the palace. The baby was curious. When she held me out to him, he grabbed me and stuffed me into his mouth. Glumdalclitch screamed. The mother pulled me out quickly. I was wet but unhurt. After that, the queen made a new rule: no one could bring children near me. These events made me more careful. I began to think that I might not live long in this land if I wasn't protected. Everything around me was large and strong. A small fall, a dog, or a simple accident could end my life. Then came a day when my life changed forever. The royal family wanted to take a trip along the coast. They traveled in a special house built on a large cart, pulled by many horses. It had rooms, windows, and everything needed for comfort. Glumdalclitch brought my box and placed it near a window so I could enjoy the sea air. I stayed inside, reading and resting. But while the queen and her party walked along the beach, a huge bird flew down. It was a giant eagle. It thought my box was food or a toy. It grabbed the roof with its claws and lifted the box into the air. I shouted. I was thrown around inside. The box rose higher and higher, then suddenly the bird dropped it. I fell for a long time. Then the box hit water. It floated, thanks to the soft cushions and the way it was built. I was alone, at sea again, in a tiny house on a huge ocean. I waited, hoping someone would see me. That night, I heard voices. A ship had spotted the box and pulled it aboard. They opened the door and found me, shaking and weak. The sailors were shocked. I told them my name and asked where we were. They said we were near the coast of India, and they were heading back to England. I cried with joy. I was finally going home. Chapter 8. When the sailors pulled my floating box onto their ship, I was weak and tired. I had been in that little wooden house for many hours, maybe a full day, and I was sure I would die. So when I saw real human faces, normal-sized men, I cried with joy. They were surprised to see such a small person in such a strange house, but they were kind. The captain came to speak with me. He asked who I was, where I came from, and how I had gotten there. I told him my name was Lemuel Gulliver. I said I was English, and that I had been left behind during a sea journey. I said I had traveled through strange lands and had many stories to tell. He listened with interest. At first, I did not tell him the whole truth. I said nothing about Brobdingnag. I thought he would laugh. But over the next few days, as I rested and recovered, I slowly told him more. He listened carefully. When I described the land of the giants, he looked serious. I showed him a few small items I had kept: clothes made by Glumdalclitch, a comb made from a giant's hair, a bracelet the queen had given me, and a toothpick carved from a tree branch. The captain touched the objects and said, "These are not from any place I know." He believed me. I asked where the ship was going. He said we were sailing to England, and we would arrive in about 2 months. I was very happy. I wanted to see my wife, my children, and my home. During the journey, I spent time with the crew. I told them about Lilliput and Brobdingnag. Some laughed, but some believed me. I said I had lived among people who were 6 inches tall, and then among people who were 60 feet tall. I told them how I was treated like a giant in one place and like a toy in another. The men asked, which country did you like better? I said, the Brobdingnagians were large in body but even greater in heart. They were kind, fair, and honest. Their king ruled with wisdom. In Lilliput, people were small in both size and spirit. They fought over silly things. Their leaders cared more about games and politics than about helping people. When we reached England, I went straight to my home. My family was shocked to see me. They thought I was dead. I hugged my wife and children and gave thanks for being alive. I unpacked my things. I showed my wife the tiny clothes, the little furniture, and the bee stingers from Brobdingnag. She was amazed. I told her everything, and she believed me. But soon I noticed something strange in myself. After living among giants, I found it hard to live among people of my own size. Everyone looked small and weak. A normal man seemed like a baby. A horse looked like a dog. I could not stop comparing. When I saw people arguing or showing off, I thought, you are not giants, you are little in every way. When I heard someone speak proudly of war or power, I remembered the king of Brobdingnag and how he had laughed at our foolish pride. For a long time, I was quiet. I stayed home and did not talk much. I wrote down my story in secret. I wanted to remember everything, every face, every place, every lesson. One day, a friend came to visit. He was a judge and liked to talk about politics. He asked me what I thought of the government. I said, I have seen better. He laughed. What country could be better than England? I said, a country where people are honest, rulers are wise, and laws are clear. A place where the poor are not forgotten and where peace matters more than pride. He stopped laughing. Later, when I showed some of my items from Brobdingnag to scientists and rich men, they offered me money. They wanted to keep the comb, the bracelet, and the chair Glumdalclitch had made for me. I said no. Those things were dear to me. They were not just objects, they were memories of people who had treated me with kindness. I missed Glumdalclitch the most. She was just a child, but she had cared for me like a sister, even like a mother. I wondered if she was well. Did she miss me too? I knew I could never return to Brobdingnag. I was too small to travel back, and their world was far from mine. But in my heart, I kept their lessons. I remembered how they lived, with honesty, with peace, with care for others. Back in England, I began to notice more of our flaws. I saw people cheating in business, fighting over politics, and hurting each other for power. I saw how often pride and greed ruled men's actions. I thought, we are so small, yet we act so big. I began to speak more carefully. I avoided arguments. I helped the poor when I could. I taught my children not to lie, not to be proud, and to treat everyone with respect. Sometimes people laughed at me. They said I was strange, that I had changed. But I did not mind. I had lived among giants. I had seen the world from the eyes of a small man. And now I understood what truly made a person great. It was not height, not wealth, not clever words. It was kindness, wisdom, and peace. Part 3, A Voyage to Laputa, BALNIBARBI, LUGGNAGG, GLUBBDUBDRIB, and Japan. Chapter 1. After living quietly at home for a few years, I once again felt the urge to travel. My wife did not want me to go, but I promised it would be my last journey. In the year 1706, I left England as the captain of a small merchant ship. Our plan was to trade goods with nearby islands and return quickly. For a while, everything went well. We visited several ports and made good deals. But near the coast of India, things went wrong. One night, a group of pirates attacked our ship. There were 2 pirate ships, one full of Dutchmen, and the other full of Japanese sailors. We fought hard, but they boarded our ship and took control. The pirates took all our goods. They argued about what to do with us. Some wanted to kill us. Others said we should be left on the next island. Because I had treated a Japanese sailor kindly during the battle, he spoke up for me. He told the captain I should be spared. At last, they agreed not to kill me, but to leave me on a small rocky island with no people. So I was left alone. I had a little bread and water, but no boat. I sat on the rocks and watched the pirates sail away. I felt hopeless. I was far from home, with no way to escape. I thought I might die there. On the 3rd day, I saw something strange in the sky. A shadow passed over me, blocking the sun. I looked up and was shocked. Floating in the air was a large island. It moved slowly, like a giant ship, but in the sky. It made no sound. I could see trees, buildings, and people walking on it. I stood up and waved my arms. I shouted, hoping they would see me. After a few minutes, the island stopped moving. A rope ladder was lowered from the sky. I grabbed it, and strong hands pulled me up. As I rose higher, I felt fear and wonder. I had never imagined such a thing. A flying island, with people living on it, it was like a dream. When I reached the top, I was surrounded by strange men. They were dressed in clothes I had never seen before. Most of them looked serious and thoughtful. Their eyes were always turned up, as if watching the sky. Some of them looked sideways every few seconds. A few had servants who hit them gently with soft sticks to keep them awake or remind them to pay attention. These people were the strangest I had ever seen. They seemed intelligent, but also confused. They loved music and mathematics. They talked about the stars and numbers all the time. But they didn't care much about real life or the world around them. They took me to their leader. He asked me questions in a language I did not understand. I tried to speak several languages, but he did not know any of them. So they gave me food and a bed and waited until someone could help translate. The next day, a man came who had studied many languages. He spoke some English and Spanish, and we began to understand each other. I learned that the name of the flying island was Laputa. It floated above a larger land called BALNIBARBI, which it ruled from the sky. The people of Laputa were smart in theory but poor at practical things. They loved to invent strange machines and study science, but they could not build houses properly or make clothes that fit well. Their clothes were full of shapes and numbers. Their houses were falling apart, and their tools often broke. The king of Laputa ruled over BALNIBARBI by using the flying island. If a city on the ground did not obey him, he floated the island above it and blocked the sun. If that did not work, he dropped rocks or even crushed the city with the island itself. But he rarely used full force. Most people obeyed because they feared him. I found the people polite but hard to talk to. They were always thinking about complex ideas. Their minds were full of stars, circles, and angles. They forgot simple things like eating or listening. Servants had to hit them with soft fans or whisper in their ears to help them focus. One man explained their main problem: they lived too much in their heads. "We are clever," he said, "but we have no common sense." They made new ways to count the stars but could not plant a garden. They could draw the shape of the wind but could not build a windmill. I stayed in Laputa for several days. The king invited me to his palace. It was round, and many rooms were filled with machines that made music or showed the movement of the planets. He asked me many questions, mostly about England's mathematics and science. He was bored when I spoke of politics or farming. I saw that they had schools where young men studied floating rocks and invisible forces. But they had no schools for learning how to grow food, build houses, or care for the sick. Their country below the flying island was poor, while the sky people spoke of wisdom. I asked if I could visit the land below, BALNIBARBI. They said yes. I was curious to see how the people lived under such strange rulers. I wanted to know if the flying island helped them or hurt them. So I made my plan to travel down. The people of Laputa agreed. They lowered me with ropes and sent a guide to help me. And so, once again, I began a new adventure, in a land ruled from the sky, full of minds that loved stars but forgot the earth. Chapter 2. The flying island of Laputa lowered me gently to the land below, BALNIBARBI. A man named Minoti was sent to guide me. He was a nobleman and once worked at the court, but the king had removed him from office. Still, he was kind and intelligent, and he welcomed me warmly. We traveled to the city of LUGGNAGG, the capital of BALNIBARBI. On the way, I looked around and noticed something very strange. The fields were dry and empty. The houses were old and falling apart. The people looked poor and sad. I asked Minoti, "Why is the land so wasted? Why do the people look so unhappy?" He answered, "You see the results of new thinking. About 40 years ago, some people from Laputa came down with big ideas. They said the old ways of farming, building, and living were wrong. They built an academy to teach their methods. Everyone began to follow them. But instead of helping, these new ideas ruined our country." I was shocked. "You mean people stopped using what worked, just to try new things?" He nodded. "Yes. And if someone tries to do things the old way, like using strong tools or planting healthy crops, he is called foolish. People laugh at him." I asked, "Do these new methods bring any success?" Minoti sighed. "Almost none. Yet people are afraid to speak against them. The king of Laputa supports these experiments, so we all must pretend they are good." When we reached Minoti's house, I saw something different. His land was green. His house was clean and strong. His servants were cheerful. The food was simple but fresh. I said, "This place feels alive." He smiled. "Because I still do things the old way. I grow crops like my father did. I use tools that last. But I do it quietly. If the king finds out, he may punish me." I stayed with Minoti for 3 days. He was a great host. Then I asked to visit the famous Academy of LUGGNAGG. He warned me it would be strange, but he sent a servant to guide me. The academy was a large building with many rooms. Each room had men working on new inventions or ideas. They were all scientists or thinkers. The servant told me the academy had existed for 40 years. The people in it were called projectors, men who made projects to improve the world. I was curious and excited. In the first room, a man was trying to turn ice into gunpowder. He said it would be safer to store. He had worked on this for 8 years but had no success. In the second room, a scientist was working on a machine to turn human waste into food. He said we threw away useful things every day. He believed we could recycle everything. I smiled politely but felt sick. In another room, a man was trying to build houses from the roof down. He said starting at the top would be faster. But after 20 years, he still hadn't finished even one house. In the next room, a blind man was mixing colors to paint pictures. I asked how he could know what he was doing. He said he used touch and smell to choose colors. The wall behind him was covered in black paint. I saw another man trying to make spiders weave cloth. He fed them colored flies and believed their webs would turn into beautiful fabric. But the webs kept breaking. In another place, someone was teaching students how to write without thinking. He had a machine full of wooden blocks. Each block had a word on it. The students turned the handles, and the blocks moved. When the blocks stopped, they copied the sentence. The teacher said, "This way, anyone can write books, even if he has no ideas." I walked from room to room, more and more confused. These men were clever but strange. Their ideas were big, but nothing ever worked. They used their whole lives for experiments, and the country grew poorer every day. At last, I asked to see a room with useful work. I was taken to the math department. There, I met a man who had invented a new way to measure land. He said his tool could divide an inch into 1,000,000 parts. I asked if it helped farmers. He said, "No, but it's a great idea." I also met someone who wanted to teach people how to speak by using music notes. He thought every word could be a sound. I tried it, but the sentences made no sense. He said, "It will take 20 years to learn, but once people understand it, they'll never forget." I thanked them for showing me around, but I felt sad. So many smart men were doing useless work. The fields outside were empty. The houses were broken. People were hungry. And still, the academy was full of dreams that helped no one. On my way back to Minoti's house, I thought, is this what happens when we love ideas more than people? When I returned, Minoti asked what I thought. I said, "They are very clever, but they forget to care for others. They study big things but forget the little ones." He nodded. That is the danger. Knowledge without wisdom is a shadow. After a few more days, I decided to leave BALNIBARBI. I had seen enough of flying islands and failed experiments. I wanted to find something more human, more real. Minoti helped me prepare for the next part of my journey. I would go to the port city and sail to a new island. I thanked him for his kindness. He said, "Remember what you saw, but also remember what you felt." And so, I said goodbye to the land ruled by ideas, and began sailing toward the island of GLUBBDUBDRIB, not knowing what strange things waited for me there. Chapter 3. After leaving BALNIBARBI, I took a short journey by sea to a strange island called GLUBBDUBDRIB. The captain of the ship that brought me there warned me it was a magical place. He said the people practiced sorcery, and that the governor of the island had special powers. At first, I did not believe him. I had seen many strange lands before, flying islands, giant people, tiny kingdoms, but magic seemed too wild to be real. As we approached the island, I noticed that the buildings were made of black stone. The city was clean and quiet. The streets were wide, and the air smelled of flowers and herbs. When I reached the governor's palace, I was welcomed with respect. His servants were dressed in black robes and moved silently. The governor himself was tall and serious. He wore long silver robes, and his eyes looked deep, as if he saw things no one else could see. He spoke kindly and said, "You are welcome in GLUBBDUBDRIB. You may stay here for 10 days. During that time, you may ask me anything." Then he added, "And if there is anyone you wish to speak with from history, living or dead, just tell me. I will call them for you." At first, I did not understand. "Call them?" I asked. "Yes," he said. "I can bring back the spirits of the dead. They will appear before you and answer your questions. You may speak with kings, generals, poets, or even ordinary men from any time." I was amazed. I asked if I could test this. He smiled and clapped his hands. A servant brought a long book. The governor pointed to a name, and at once, a man appeared in the room. He was pale but strong. He looked around and then bowed. "This," said the governor, "is Alexander the Great." I was shocked. I had read about Alexander in school. He was a powerful king who conquered many lands. I asked him, "Did you really die from a fever?" He replied, "No. I was poisoned by men I trusted." I had read many books about Alexander's life and death. None had told the truth. Now, I was learning real history, from the people who lived it. Next, I asked to see Hannibal, the famous general who had crossed the Alps with elephants. He appeared with a strong face and dark eyes. He said he had failed in the end not because of enemies, but because of jealous friends in his own country. Then I asked to speak with Caesar, Brutus, and Cato, leaders from ancient Rome. They came one by one. Caesar spoke of power and danger. Brutus talked about honor. Cato spoke of freedom and said it was better to die than to lose it. I listened carefully. These were not the proud men I had read about in books. They were human, full of doubts and pain. Each evening for the next few days, I visited the governor and asked to see more people from history. I saw Homer, the poet, and asked him about his writings. He said many of the stories told in his name were not his. I saw Aristotle and asked him about philosophy. He said many of his teachings had been misunderstood. I also asked to see modern kings, people who had ruled in the last 200 years. I asked them about their wars, their choices, and their mistakes. Many of them looked sad. One king said, "I wanted to help my people, but I listened too much to bad advice." Another said, "I fought wars for glory, but in the end, they only brought suffering." It surprised me how many rulers admitted they had made mistakes. Some were used by others. Some were weak. Some were proud. But very few had been truly wise. Then I asked the governor, "Can I speak to ordinary people? Not just famous names, but farmers, doctors, or builders from long ago?" He agreed. I met a Roman farmer who had once saved a village from hunger. I spoke with a woman from ancient Greece who had cared for sick children during a plague. I listened to a Chinese man who had invented a useful tool but had died poor and unknown. These people had no statues or books written about them, but their words were honest. Their lives were full of quiet courage. I realized something important: history is often wrong. Books are written by winners, by powerful men who want to look good. But the real truth is different. Heroes were not always noble. Kings were not always wise. And many great people were never remembered at all. On my last evening in GLUBBDUBDRIB, I asked to see the spirits of the historians, those who wrote the books we study in school. I asked them why their stories did not match what I had heard from the real people. One said, "I wrote what the king told me to write." Another said, "I wanted to be famous, so I made the stories more exciting." Another said, "I didn't know the truth, so I copied from others." I left the room in silence. I felt like I had been blind and now could see. The past was not what I thought. It was more real, more sad, more full of lessons than I had ever known. I thanked the governor for his kindness. I said, "You have shown me more in 10 days than I learned in 20 years. He smiled. Truth lives longer than lies. But sometimes, it needs to be called back. I boarded a ship the next morning. My heart was full. I had spoken with the dead. I had learned that power fades, but kindness lasts. That names may be forgotten, but deeds remain. And now, I sailed toward a new land, LUGGNAGG. What lessons waited for me there, I did not know. Chapter 4. After leaving GLUBBDUBDRIB, I sailed to another island called LUGGNAGG. The journey took a few days. The people there spoke a language similar to BALNIBARBI's, so I could understand them easily. When I arrived at the port, the officials asked where I came from and what I wanted. I said I was from England and wished to travel to Japan. They told me I must first meet the king of LUGGNAGG and get his permission. I was taken to the capital city. It was large and clean, with strong buildings and wide streets. The people were polite but serious. I was given a place to stay and told to wait until the king was ready to see me. After a few days, a messenger came and said I must prepare for an audience with the king. But first, I had to follow a special custom of LUGGNAGG. Every visitor who wanted to meet the king had to lick the floor as he approached the throne. This showed respect and loyalty. At first, I was shocked. But I was told it was normal in this land, and if I refused, I might be punished or sent away. So, I agreed. When I entered the king's hall, I saw a golden throne and many guards. The floor was smooth and clean. As I walked forward, I bent down and touched my tongue to the ground. The king looked at me and smiled. He said something in a kind voice, and the people around him seemed pleased. Later, one of the officials explained something strange. He said, "Sometimes the king has enemies, and he does not trust them. So, he secretly puts poison on the floor. If someone licks the poison, they die within an hour. But don't worry. The floor was clean today." I was both relieved and frightened. It was a clever but terrible way to deal with danger. The king asked many questions about England. He was curious about our ships, our laws, our customs, and our leaders. I answered honestly. He seemed intelligent and friendly. He offered me a job in his court, but I politely said no. I wanted to return to my family in England. While I waited for permission to travel to Japan, I stayed in the capital city and spoke with many people. One day, a man told me about a strange group of people in LUGGNAGG. He said they were called the Struldbrugs. Struldbrugs? I asked. What are they? He smiled. They are people who never die. Never die? I said. You mean they live forever? Yes, he said. When a Struldbrug is born, there is a special mark above the left eyebrow. It shows that the child is one of them. They grow up like everyone else, but they never die. They live forever. I was amazed. I thought, this must be a great gift. To live forever, to learn everything, to see the world change, that would be wonderful. But the man shook his head. No, he said. It is not a gift. It is a curse. I didn't understand. So he explained more. You see, he said, Struldbrugs don't stay young. They grow old like the rest of us. But they never die. So they just keep getting older and older, weaker and weaker. I listened carefully. At first, he said, they are normal. But after 80 years, they start to change. Their memory fades. They forget names and faces. They become jealous of young people. They cannot enjoy life. He continued, at 90, they cannot work. At 100, they cannot walk. Their minds are confused. They speak nonsense. But still, they live. I asked, do they have special care? Are they respected? The man laughed. No. They are pitied. They must live in poor houses. They are not allowed to own land. They are not allowed to vote. People give them food, but no one wants to be near them. I was shocked. I had thought eternal life would be a blessing. But now I saw it differently. I asked, do they marry? No, he said. They must not marry after 80. And they cannot have children. It would be cruel. He added, some have lived 200 years. They have seen many changes, but they enjoy none of them. They live in darkness, in pain, in sadness. That night, I thought deeply. In England, people dream of living longer. They fear death. But now I had learned that life without end, without youth, without joy, is not a gift. It is a prison. I remembered the wise people of BROBDINGNAG. They believed in peace and kindness, not power. And now, in LUGGNAGG, I saw that even magic could not make life better. It could only make it longer. I stayed in LUGGNAGG for a few more weeks. Then the king gave me permission to leave. He even wrote a letter to the Emperor of Japan, asking him to treat me kindly. I left by ship and soon arrived in Japan. The Japanese people were polite. They asked about my travels. I told them part of my story, but not everything. I did not speak of flying islands or ghosts. I knew they would not believe it. The emperor read the king's letter and gave me a safe pass. He allowed me to stay for a short time. Then I asked for a ship to return to Europe. The emperor agreed. From Japan, I sailed to the Dutch East Indies, and from there, I joined a ship going to Amsterdam. After some months, I finally returned to England. I went back to my home, to my wife and children. They were surprised to see me alive. I had been away for many years. But something had changed inside me. I had seen lands no one else had seen. I had learned strange truths about life and death, power and weakness, knowledge and wisdom. And I no longer saw the world as I once had. Chapter 5. After being in Japan and on my way back home to England, I had time to think about all I had seen. Once I arrived in Amsterdam, I stayed there for a few weeks. I used the time to write notes and send letters to my family. I thought about the strange lands I had visited, LAPUTA, BALNIBARBI, GLUBBDUBDRIB, LUGGNAGG, and Japan. The people I met taught me many lessons about life, power, and knowledge. While in Amsterdam, a Dutch merchant offered me a chance to stay longer, but I wanted to return home to my wife and children. I missed them very much. Still, I made a final visit to a famous mathematician and astronomer. I told him about LAPUTA, the floating island in the sky. He listened with interest but said it was too strange to believe. He asked many questions about the island's machines and magic. I answered honestly, but he shook his head. He said, "Your story is fascinating, but science must be based on what we can see and test. A flying island is impossible according to our knowledge." I understood his skepticism, but I knew what I had seen. I also had the memories of people I had met, royal courts, sorcerers, and rulers of strange lands. I realized that not everything in the world can be explained by simple science. There are wonders beyond our books. Soon after, I boarded a ship bound for England. The journey was long, but I passed the time by writing letters and recording details I had forgotten. I wrote down the languages I had learned, the customs I had seen, and the people who had welcomed me. I wanted to remember everything clearly. One night, I stood on the ship's deck and looked up at the stars. I thought about Laputa and how people there watched the sky all the time. I had stood beside them, staring at circles and angles. But here, under the open sky, I felt humble. I had seen the vastness of the world and realized how small I really was. When I finally reached England, I hurried home. My wife and children were waiting. When I walked through the door, they rushed to greet me. Tears and joy filled the room. We embraced. My heart felt full. I knew that even after visiting so many lands, the greatest treasure I had was my family. During the next weeks, I gathered friends and scholars. I told them all the stories I had, of Lilliput, BROBDINGNAG, LAPUTA, and the others. Some laughed, others listened carefully. One scholar asked questions that reminded me of the Laputan men, who loved numbers and ideas. Another asked about the Struldbrugs. I told him about the curse of eternal age. He shook his head, feeling sorry. But there were lessons that everyone agreed on. Honesty mattered. Wisdom mattered more than knowledge. Kindness and peace were the greatest gifts. I also realized that books, and stories, can hide truth or show it. It is our duty to look carefully. I published my writings in a small book, titled Travels into Several Remote Nations of the World. It had 4 parts. People read it for its interesting stories. Scholars read it to think about politics, society, and humanity. Some though it was pure fiction. Others believed every word. I wrote a note at the end, saying, "Take this as a story, but also as a lesson. Judge each part by your reason, not by your wonder." In the years that followed, I lived quietly in England. I visited my family. Sometimes, I thought about returning to sea. But I felt it was enough. I had seen wonders, but the greatest wonder of all was life. Simple, honest, loving life. Chapter 6. After returning to England from Amsterdam, I could not stop thinking about all my voyages, so many events that seemed impossible, the flying island, speaking spirits, and the eternal sufferers. But let's go back to the journey. After Japan, I sailed to Holland, and from there across the English Channel. On that passage, I met the captain of an old Dutch ship and told him about my travels in Asia and other lands. At first, he thought it sounded like a fairy tale, but when I showed him the Emperor of Japan's letter with imperial seal and writing, he believed me. When I got home, I found that family and friends thought I was lost forever. They were surprised, happy, and some thought my stories incredible. Some said I had gone mad. Others said it was only clever fiction. To prove that my tales were true, I shared every detail with scientists and scholars. I spoke of the ships that carried me, the languages I learned, and the amazing natural wonders I saw. I described Lilliput and its foolish wars over egg cracks, Brobdingnag and its truthful giants, Laputa and its thinker islanders who looked to the stars but forgot the earth, and now, people who considered power and mortality across centuries. Each story held lessons no monastery school could teach. Many scholars became interested. They asked about the flying islands machine and how it stayed in the sky. I explained how it used magnets to stay afloat and could change altitude by shifting them, a concept they drew, measured, and began to test in their labs. They were also amazed by Brobdingnag. Some wondered if they could breed dragons or build giant cities. I warned them, the giants used strength for peace, not war, and wisdom mattered more than power. The strongest reaction came when I mentioned the immortal beings, the Struldbrugs. Many laughed at first, but stopped when I explained how eternal life, without youth or purpose, was a curse, not a blessing. Faces fell. Some said they would rather live a short life full of joy. Natural scientists asked to see real artifacts from faraway lands. I showed a beautiful ring from the Japanese emperor, clothing from Brobdingnag, a manuscript written in the language of Laputa, and a small magnet from the floating island. They gasped and said they had never seen anything like them. Together, we examined books, studied languages, played music from strange lands, and inspired each other with tales of faraway people. For a time, we even forgot our own limits in the wonder of discovery. As months passed, my story inspired changes. Some scholars began to test floating mechanisms, tiny magnets over water, trying to replicate Laputa's hold on the sky. Others debated the dangers of eternal life and death with people they called the immortals. But I remained humble. I had seen greatness and folly. I had seen wisdom and sorrow. I knew knowledge must be balanced with reason, strength with kindness, and life with meaning. Now, at home in England, I wrote the final parts of my travels. I included reflections on power, mortality, curiosity, and truth. I urged readers, measure new ideas against old wisdom, and weigh power with care. I ended with a plan to publish my 4 journeys in one volume, titled Travels into Several Remote Nations of the World. I explained that readers should treat it as both a story and a lesson. And so I closed the book on my travels, but not on learning. If I ever sail again, it will be with caution and respect for what a truly wise world holds. Chapter 7. After settling back in England, I often thought about my adventures in those distant lands. But over time, I began to read and write again. I completed the last draft of my book and prepared it for the printer. I wanted to tell the world not only the amazing stories I had lived but also what I had learned, about wisdom, justice, and human nature. One evening, after a long day of writing, I received a letter from a scholar I had met in Amsterdam. He asked if I would attend a meeting of learned men to talk about Laputa's flying island and its technology. He wanted to discuss magnets, gravity, and unusual machines. I accepted. Though I still doubted if science should rush toward strange inventions, I also felt responsible to explain what I had seen. At the meeting, I described how the island worked, heavy magnets in its base, operated by philosophers, how its position shifted by moving those magnets, and how its power over ground cities came from blocking the sun or sending down rocks. The scholars listened closely. Some were fascinated. Others asked questions, and we discussed whether such an island could truly exist. For some, it was like telling them a fairy tale. For others, a possibility. One man said, if such a place existed, no government would be safe. It would show the danger of too much power in the hands of a few. I agreed. Another scholar asked about Laputa's weakness, how the people forgot simple things. I replied, wisdom without practical sense is like a man holding a powerful tool he does not know how to use. They nodded. I thought, perhaps these scholars might learn from my travels and focus on balancing theory with real-world value. Next, I was asked about the Struldbrugs again. We talked about mortality, aging, and the real meaning of being alive. Some said they would not want eternal life. One wise doctor said, give me a good death at the right time, I do not wish for endless years filled with suffering. We moved on to languages and the people who spoke broken tongues to me, Laputians, Lugnaggians, Japanese. I explained how language shapes thought. Laputians thought in circles and triangles, Brobdingnagians thought in simple words of honesty, and Lilliputians argued over small things. They saw that language guides not just speech, but perception. When we spoke of GLUBBDUBDRIB, many asked about the dead. I said, listening to spirits of the past taught me that history is written by the living, or the powerful. But truth lives on and can be found if we ask. They fell silent, as if sensing what I had learned in that magical place, the good, the bad, and the hidden. After the meeting, an old friend invited me to dinner. We spoke of the world, Europe, Asia, America, as if all our travels mattered. I explained that travel is not only for adventure but for understanding, to see different governments, different ways of treating others, different ways to live. My friend asked, do you regret going? I answered, never. Because with each journey, I saw a new way of being, the small-minded wars of Lilliput, the honest giants of Brobdingnag, the sky-thinkers of Laputa, the hopeless experiments of BALNIBARBI, the magical truths of GLUBBDUBDRIB, the silent curse of immortality in LUGGNAGG, and the polite mysteries of Japan. Each place taught me what not to be, and what a good life can be. He nodded slowly. After that season, the printer finished my book. I announced it as, Travels into Several Remote Nations of the World. I wrote a preface explaining that though the stories seem strange, they carry lessons for all, about moderation, humility, respect, and the value of life. Shortly after the book appeared, I received letters from all around, some amazed, some angry, some doubtful. But one letter stood out. It was from a scholar of Japan. He praised my honesty, your words about balance and humanity speak across cultures. He invited me to translate my writings into Japanese. It was remarkable, my words had traveled as far as I had, regardless of ships or islands. In the weeks that followed, I looked at my home and family with new eyes. I listened to neighbors fighting over small matters and recalled the giants who cared more for truth than gold. I heard people bragging about titles and war, and remembered the curse of immortality, how empty it felt without friendship or purpose. I spent my days planting a small garden, teaching my children to read truthfully, and visiting neighbors to help with simple tasks. I did not need to travel anymore to find wonder. I saw it in small kindnesses, just as real as any island in the sky. Sometimes, I still dreamed about distant lands, the wind on Laputa, the teacups of Brobdingnag, the dead speaking truth in GLUBBDUBDRIB, the fearful Struldbrugs, and the polite bows of the Japanese emperor. Each dream reminded me, life is both fragile and magical, and though we live in a small island ourselves, our hearts can be giants. Chapter 8. As I continued my travels, I left LUGGNAGG and sailed toward Japan. The journey was long, but the sea was calm. Along the way, I had much time to think about what I had learned. Power without wisdom is dangerous, long life without health is a burden, clever ideas without purpose lead nowhere. Finally, we reached the coast of Japan, a land full of distant stories, of samurai, strict rules, and ancient traditions. The captain had a letter from the king of LUGGNAGG, asking the emperor of Japan to receive me kindly. I was both anxious and excited. At the harbor, I was greeted by officials wearing silk robes and hats. They looked at me and the letter, then led me to a small boat. We went through narrow canals lined with wooden houses built high above the water. The sun shone on paper lanterns, and I saw people working while wearing wide hats. We reached a city on a hill. Guards at the gate checked my letters and asked my name. Then they led me to the emperor's palace, a beautiful place of tile roofs, painted walls, and carefully trimmed trees. Inside the palace, I met the emperor. He wore fine robes of blue and gold. He looked calm but curious. He asked me to sit on cushions and offered me tea. I drank politely, then he asked me about my journey. I told him of distant lands, the little people of Lilliput, the giants of Brobdingnag, the sky islanders of Laputa, the ruined academy in BALNIBARBI, the spirits of GLUBBDUBDRIB, and the cursed immortals of LUGGNAGG. He listened without interruption. When I finished, he nodded. "You have seen much," he said through a translator. "Your travels show both wonder and danger in the world." He asked me about Japan. He said, "Our land cares for order and respect. We study the past and live simply. Tell me, what does your country value?" I thought of my homeland, its scholars, churches, rich cities, and loud politics. I hesitated, then answered, "We value freedom and reason, but also wealth and titles. At times, we fight for our beliefs. We build works of art and engines of war." The emperor frowned. He said, "Balance is important. Too much freedom brings chaos. Too much wealth brings greed. Peace must come from wisdom." I agreed. He then asked, "What do you think of our laws?" I answered, "They are strict but fair. You punish crime and reward good behavior. People respect the law." He smiled. "Yes. We believe that respect keeps society healthy. And we study poetry and art, not just tools and power." We spoke for many hours through translators and scribes. I told him of knowledge without humanity in Laputa, and of the hollow wisdom of the immortals in LUGGNAGG. I told him how peaceful villages suffered under powerful rulers, and warned him of pride and neglect. The emperor thanked me. He said, "Your stories teach me more about my own people than many of my ministers. Travel shapes understanding." He then honored me with a small gift, an ivory box carved with scenes from Japanese gardens. He said, "Keep it. It will remind you that some things are beautiful and need no protection." I was moved. I bowed deeply and thanked him. I said, "Your Majesty's kindness will not be forgotten." For several days, I stayed in the palace. I was shown gardens with raked stones, bamboo fences, and bright flowers. I walked through tea houses with sliding screens and watched monks meditate in silence. The officials took me to visit schools and libraries. I was surprised by the order and discipline in everything. Children bowed to their teachers, samurai greeted me politely, and crowds moved quietly, with respect. Yet there was also strictness. I saw punishments for crimes I would not punish, like speaking ill of a leader or forgetting a ritual. I was uneasy, but I felt the laws kept people calm and safe. I asked about trade with other countries. The emperor said they traded carefully, only with trusted partners. He said that talking to strangers could bring both knowledge and risk. So they made rules, checked everyone, and refused bargains that looked harmful. I admired the balance and order. Yet I also liked the open curiosity of Europe, its scholars, its debates, its experiments, even when they went too far, as in BALNIBARBI. One evening, I was invited to a tea ceremony. It was a quiet event with water boiled over hot stones and green tea served in plain bowls. Everything was deliberate, cups passed carefully, benches placed for comfort, but with no show. Guests spoke softly. No one rushed. I thought of the loud dinners in BROBDINGNAG, the noisy battles of LILLIPUT, and the chaotic lectures in LAPUTA. Here, people moved as if breathing in harmony, with purpose. Afterward, I walked in the moonlit garden. I heard frogs, saw lanterns glowing, and felt calm. I realized that travel had taught me to appreciate both wonder and stillness, both ambition and peace. My journey in Japan was short but meaningful. I learned that strength comes from harmony, not force. I saw that law without compassion can be cold. I understood that curiosity should respect order. When the time came for me to leave, the emperor and his court gave me a fine robe of silk and a scroll of poems. They told me to write about their land with care. I promised I would. I boarded the ship, holding the silk robe, the scroll, and the ivory box. I watched the palace disappear behind hills and reached for the sail. I set course for the Dutch East Indies, then home to England, carrying with me the lessons of balance, respect, stillness, and the quiet power of small things done well. Chapter 9. After I left Japan, I sailed to the Dutch East Indies, and from there to Amsterdam. Although I had many items with me, the silk robe, poems, ivory box, I was still full of new questions. In Amsterdam, I took time to rest and reflect. I thought about Laputa's floating island, Brobdingnag's giants, GLUBBDUBDRIB's spirits, LUGGNAGG's immortals, and Japan's discipline. I asked myself, what do these places tell me about my own country, England? One morning, I received a letter from a man who had seen my book. He invited me to visit him in his study, a quiet room filled with books, maps, and instruments. I went with curiosity. He welcomed me and said he was especially interested in one part of my travels, when I spoke with spirits from history in GLUBBDUBDRIB. He asked, did they really speak as plain men, no magic? Did they show honesty? I answered, yes, they spoke plainly, they did not want to impress me, they talked about their mistakes, regrets, and weaknesses. He nodded and said, that means history is not just about famous names, it is about ordinary lives and honest actions. We spoke about the egg wars in Lilliput. He laughed and said, such small arguments lead to great violence, I wonder if we do the same, but with words or money. I replied, yes, in England we fight over religion, politics, land, and trade, we say we are different, but often our actions are the same as the Lilliputians. We became silent. Then he asked, what was the greatest lesson you learned? I thought deeply and said, power must be used with wisdom, not pride. Long life without purpose is a sorrow. Ideas need care in practice. Truth lives longer than glory. Stillness can be stronger than noise. He smiled and I realized I sounded like a wise man, though I had only learned these through travel. He then showed me a new instrument, a telescope set for astronomy. He asked if I had seen the stars from Laputa. I said yes, but I also watched the land of giants and heard voices of the past. He asked, which view was stronger? I answered, the world below matters as much as the sky above, watching stars is wonderful, but helping people on earth is wiser. He wrote that down and later he sent the note to universities to remind students that science must serve humanity, not just curiosity. Over the next days, I visited scholars and taught them what I had learned. In BALNIBARBI, they studied theories at the expense of real work. They needed balance between thought and action. In Laputa, minds lived in abstraction. They forgot human life while chasing numbers. In LUGGNAGG, immortality was a tragedy, not a blessing. Life is best when it is limited and lived well. In Japan, they showed that humility and order build a calm and just society. I also met an old friend who had been involved in politics. He asked me, could any of these systems work in England? I said, we need honesty like BROBDINGNAG. We need care like Japan. We need truth like GLUBBDUBDRIB. We must learn from our mistakes like LUGGNAGG. He looked thoughtful and said, maybe our country could be better, but people resist change. I agreed, yes, but if each man changes one small thing, like treating his neighbor kindly, the whole country changes. Later, a woman scholar wrote to me, your travels show that people everywhere want dignity, small or great, but power can twist that desire. How can we teach future generations? I replied. By telling them stories. Stories of giant kindness. Of fool's pride. Of lost lives in tables and machines. By showing that the greatest worth is unseen, honesty, wisdom, service. My book began to have influence. Teachers used parts of it in schools. Ministers used parts in their sermons. Some even spoke of using Japan's calm respect as an example for local laws. I did not expect this. I had only wanted to tell the world what I'd seen. But now, I saw the power of stories to shape thoughts and soften hearts. Years passed. I stayed in England with my family. I wrote letters to scholars abroad. I sometimes returned to sea, but no farther than Europe. I had learned that travel is not only distance, it is learning to see with new eyes. Chapter 10. After my time in Amsterdam, I felt the world had taught me many lessons. Still, my journey was not yet over. I prepared to sail for home by way of the Atlantic Ocean, knowing my story would soon reach its end. But before that, I wanted to leave one final message of balance and understanding for those who would read my voyages. The ship I joined was small but sturdy. Its captain had heard some of my stories, but most of the crew thought I was a dreamer. They did not know of floating islands or immortal men. Yet over months at sea, they came to respect me for my calm voice and careful words. One clear night, I stood on deck beneath bright stars. I thought of points in my travels where I had looked beyond what I could see and had learned what mattered most. I thought of giants and tiny people, of magic and mortality, of wisdom and folly. I decided to write more letters to friends and scholars. I wrote to the man who invented the telescope, reminding him that science should serve humanity. I wrote to the Japanese scholar, thanking him for showing me balance and respect. I wrote to my family, telling them how each land had taught me to see our home more clearly. I also reflected on the idea of travel itself. I remembered how first I left England for adventure. Then I returned to learn. After that, I traveled with purpose. Now I returned with deeper meaning. I believe travel was more than seeing new places, it was learning to live well. During the voyage, I spoke often with the captain and crew. They asked me about wars and kings. I told them what I had learned. In Lilliput small people often thought they were great but they fought over nonsense. In BROBDINGNAG silent giants cared more for honesty than wealth. In LAPUTA clever men turned away from work and from life. In BALNIBARBI ideas failed when no one built farms or houses. In GLUBBDUBDRIB spirits showed that truth is better than glory. In LUGGNAGG immortals suffered because life without end brought no joy. In Japan order and respect created peace and calm. The crew listened quietly. They said they liked stories that made them think. They said they would remember lessons of kindness, curiosity with care, and humility even after seeing great wonders. One day, we met another ship at sea. Its crew boarded us and saw some of my items, Japanese scrolls, BROBDINGNAG clothing, and the ivory box. They were amazed. They shared food and wine, and I told my stories again. People came from both ships to listen until night. When I finally reached England, I saw home like new. The fields looked greener, the air smelled sweeter, and every small act, like a neighbor helping another, felt full of meaning. I realized that small things could be great, and great things could be fragile. At home, I finished my book, adding a final season of travel and reflection. I included a summary of what each land taught. That great power must be guided by wisdom. That eternal life without joy becomes a miser's cage. That thought without action is hollow. That history needs honesty not lies. That respect and peaceful order are stronger than noise and pride. I included this final part not to brag about far journeys, but to show that each story carries a lesson. I wrote that true travel happens in the mind and in the heart, and that distance only matters when we bring back kindness, care, and understanding. When the book was published, some readers focused only on the wonders, the tiny people, the giants, the floating island. Others saw the deeper meaning. Scholars wrote about how my stories reminded them of ethics and meaning. Ministers spoke of humility and service. Teachers used my chapters to guide children toward honesty and respect. I visited schools, gave gentle advice to students, and told them to think for themselves. I visited churches and reminded people that stories can teach but also need careful listening. I visited homes and said, see wonder in the small things, but never forget the value of quiet kindness. I lived the rest of my days in England. I traveled no more by sea. My children grew and learned their own truths. My wife smiled at me when I spoke of life in far places, and I found joy in simple moments, tea in the garden, a walk at dawn, a book in a quiet room. One morning, as I walked among blooming roses, a neighbor's child ran to me and asked, "Sir, have you seen giants or flying islands?" I smiled and said, "Yes. But I have learned there may be giants of the heart, and islands of the mind." The child looked puzzled, but later he nodded and ran home. I thought, perhaps that is enough. Perhaps a seed of thought is the deepest journey we can share. Chapter 11. At last, I began the final leg of my long journey home. I left Amsterdam and took a ship across the North Sea, traveling through strong winds and cold days. This voyage felt different. It was a return, an ending, a chance to see England anew. On board, I spent time reflecting on everything I had experienced. I thought about how Lilliput showed me pride hidden in small people, how BROBDINGNAG taught me truth in kindness, how LAPUTA warned me of wisdom without sense, how BALNIBARBI revealed that ideas without action fail, how GLUBBDUBDRIB reminded me that history often hides its failures, how LUGGNAGG's immortals lived sorrowful endless lives, how Japan showed that respect and order bring peace. Thinking of these lands, I realized that my own country could be shaped by their lessons. When the ship reached the English coast, I felt both relief and joy. The wind smelled like home. The cliffs and fields outside my window were familiar, yet they felt new. My wife and children greeted me at the dock. They had waited so long. Tears and laughter mixed as we hugged. I carried with me the treasures I had brought, the ivory box, the silk robe, the silver comb, the Laputan manuscript. We walked home together. I watched my children play and thought of Brobdingnag's simple games. I listened to my neighbors talk and remembered how Laputians forgot the earth. I helped my wife in the garden and was grateful for peace. At home, I settled into a quiet life. I wrote letters to old friends in Holland, in Japan, even some in LUGGNAGG. I continued to write about my travels, adding notes about how each land's wisdom could help England grow fair, kind, and wise. A few years later, I was invited by the King's Scholar to speak at a meeting. I traveled to London and met men from court, from universities, and from churches. They asked me what I most wished people would learn from my stories. I answered, that pride in small things is a coward's path, that honesty and kindness are greater than power, that knowledge must follow compassion, that history must be learned from, not hidden, that life is meant to be lived, but not bargained away, that respect and order give strength, that small moments hold deep meaning. They listened in silence. Then one man stood up and said, "Sir Gulliver, your travels have taught our nation not to look at distance alone, but at depth. You have shown we must be both curious and careful, both bold and humble." For the rest of my life, I lived simply. I kept my eyes open, my heart kind, and my mind clear. I planted a small orchard. I taught my children to help their neighbors. I wrote essays about justice, aging, curiosity, and peace. Occasionally, I received visitors who had heard my stories. A young sailor asked me if I still believed giants existed. I answered, I saw them, but the real giants are people who live truthfully and gently. A scholar asked me if I regretted my journeys. I said, no. They showed me both the world's wonders and its dangers. But I would not sell my small life for any of those lands. When I grew old, I thought often about the islands and kingdoms I had visited. I thought of the tiny people who seemed powerful, the giants who were humble, the thinkers who built sandcastles in the sky, the land of ghosts that spoke truths, the curse of endless years, and the perfect balance of Japan. In my last years, I wrote a simple message. Be curious but compassionate. Be strong but humble. Be wise but kind. Find wonder in the small. But remember wisdom in the heart. And then I closed my pen. Part 4, A Voyage to the Country of the HOUYHNHNMS. Chapter 1. In the year 1710, I, Lemuel Gulliver, decided to travel again. After many years in England, I longed for sea and adventure. I joined a large merchant ship bound for South America. I was only a passenger, but I knew the ocean well. We left England and sailed down the coast of Africa. The journey was long and often difficult. We battled strong winds and heavy storms. Many in the crew grew sick, but I was healthy. I helped the sailors when I could. I loved the sound of sea and the wind in the sails. After weeks at sea, we reached the coast of Guinea. We stopped to buy supplies and clean the ship. The captain welcomed me on deck to meet traders. People were tense, the air was hot and humid. But we loaded fresh water, fruit, and goats. We left the port with a full hold. Some days later, we met another ship in the ocean. It was a French vessel with whales painted on its sails. We spoke briefly and showed each other friendly signals. Suddenly, we heard gunfire. The French ship attacked us, thinking we were pirates. Their cannons exploded and sent water high over our decks. The captain shouted orders. We dodged the shots and raised our own flag. We returned fire, but we were not armed enough. The French ship sailed away. We saw smoke and sails disappear on the horizon. We were shaken but safe. After that, morale dropped. The crew became nervous. Old sailors told stories of pirates and storms. Waves grew taller, wind grew colder. Some men cried. I stood by the captain and tried to cheer the crew. One night, as we sailed south, a terrible storm hit. Waves crashed over the bow. Masts cracked. Sails tore. Men shouted. The ship rolled and yawed. I grabbed a rope and held on. I looked up and saw the sky lit by lightning. Suddenly, the main mast broke and fell with a loud crash. The ship lurched. Water rushed below decks. We tried to repair the sails, but the storm was too strong. The wind changed direction. It pushed us far off course, far from Africa. The ship groaned and creaked. Then the worst happened, the main hull began to break. Water filled the lower decks. The captain ordered everyone to the lifeboats. I helped to untie the lifeboat and saw men jumping in. I climbed in too, along with 20 others. The captain said he would wait until dark before leaving. Together we watched the ship sink. It disappeared in a crash and then sank below the waves. We were afloat in a small boat in the open sea. It was dark and stormy. We had little food and water. We did not know where we were. Every man held a rope, frightened, praying. Then, in the distance, we saw dust and waves where the water looked smooth. The captain said it was land. We hoped it was near, a safe place. We rowed through wind and rain toward it. At dawn, we reached the coast of an unknown island. It was a narrow beach with white sand and tall grass behind it. We dropped anchor and landed. Some men cheered. Others fell to their knees, praying. We made a small fire and warmed ourselves. We were cold and wet. We ate what food we had, 2 hidden barrels of biscuits and dried meat. We drank little. The island was quiet and strange. I looked around and saw no houses or signs of people. The trees and grass were tall. Birds flew overhead. I heard strange noises, calls in the distance, but no voices like mine. We made shelters from wood and cloth. We tied them to rocks. The captain said we should wait until morning, then explore inland. We needed water and fresh food. That night, we ate quietly. We missed our ship. We missed home. But we were alive. I lay awake near the fire with other men. The wind blew. I thought of every country I had seen. I wondered what this island held. In my heart I felt fear, but also excitement. I had been to strange lands before, but this one felt different, more unknown. I fell asleep, but not quickly. I heard the sound of water and felt the cool sea air. I prayed to be safe. In the morning, I would follow the captain and the crew inland. I would look for life or water or shelter. I did not know what I would find, but I was ready to face it. And so began the most dangerous journey of my life, the one that would lead me to the true masters of this land, the HOUYHNHNMS, horses unlike any I had ever known. Chapter 2. At dawn, I woke to the sound of seabirds and soft waves. I stood and looked inland. The grass swayed gently. I smelled earth and plants. The rest of the crew stirred. Some were cold. Some were hungry. We had little food left. The captain called us together. He said we must choose 2 or 3 men to go inland and look for water, food, or shelter. I offered to go. The captain nodded. We picked 3 men, gifted sailors and hunters. I came too, because I could speak with the captain afterward. We carried a small pack with biscuits, dried meat, flints, rope, and a small knife. We tied water flasks tight. We left the lifeboat on the beach. As we walked, I smelled flowers and strange woods. I heard insects buzzing. I saw track marks in the sand, 3-toed footprints of birds and larger ones that looked like human shoes, but bigger and softer. We walked uphill into grass and trees. After an hour, we found what appeared to be a small stream. The water was clear. We drank, then filled our flasks. I felt hopeful again. We moved carefully. The air was warm. Birds trilled. Then I saw a strange animal, like a horse but smaller, maybe 2 feet tall at the shoulder. It was walking alone by the stream. It stopped and looked at us. It had long ears and a soft muzzle. It seemed curious, not afraid. I lowered my pack and knelt. I held out a bit of dried meat. It stepped slowly toward me. My heart beat fast. I spoke softly, "Come here, friend." It came closer, sniffed my hand, and ate from it. The other men watched in surprise. The creature looked healthy. Its coat was smooth and shiny. Its eyes were calm and intelligent. I named it Yahuhan, after a word I later learned. I petted it gently. It nodded and gave a small neigh. I smiled and said, "Thank you." We stayed by the stream for some time, letting the shipmates rest and feed. We shared biscuits with the little horse. The men named it Yahujun. Suddenly, in the tall grass, I heard voices. Not human voices, coarse, loud, and strange. They sounded like groans mixed with laughter. The men froze. I asked, "Do you hear that?" They nodded. We held our breath. The voices came closer. We heard steps, heavy, slow, measured. Then, through the trees, we saw two creatures. They were tall, strong, and walked on two legs like men. But their shapes were wrong. Their backs were low and their legs curved. Their faces were flat. They wore hides on their bodies. They smelled foul. One carried a stick. They looked at us, curious and surprised, as we looked at them. I whispered to the others, "They are like us, but not men. Keep calm." They stopped. We stopped. We stared. The creatures spoke to each other in rough voices. The words sounded like ours, but different. One stepped forward. I stood still. I spoke softly, "Hello." The creature looked angry. It shouted to the other. They raised their sticks. I moved my hands slowly and said, "We are not here to hurt. We need help. Water. Shelter." They watched us for a moment. Then the smaller one grunted and took a stick from the ground. It tapped his chest and pointed at us. I nodded. He made a low sound like "Houh." The other repeated it. We realized they were saying a word to name something, maybe me or my companion. They gestured for us to follow. I looked at the captain. He nodded. We followed the creatures through tall grass. They walked slowly, leading us toward a hill. We reached a plateau. There, we saw more creatures, like the two, but more of them. Some were carrying rough spears. They formed a group and surrounded us. Each held a long stick. I took a deep breath. I stepped forward and said, "We come in peace." One of the creatures spat on the ground. Another scanned the sky. A third touched Yahujun, kneeling beside the little horse. The creature looked at Yahujun with interest. I pointed to myself and said again, "We are men." They grunted. Then the leader pointed at Yahujun. I nodded, "His friend." They studied Yahujun. One climbed on a low rock and tapped Yahujun's head. The horse made a small neigh and nuzzled the creature. The creature smiled. Then the leader pointed to us and nodded. The men lowered their spears. We sat on the ground waiting. The creatures sat too, in a circle. They watched us. The leader made a soft sound that might have meant, "Friend." The other creatures repeated it. They seemed calm. I offered biscuits. I broke them and held out crumbled pieces. The creatures did not eat them, but accepted the gesture. One lifted a biscuit, smelled it, and put it down. I thought they might want fish. I checked the stream and found fish. I offered fish in my hand. A creature plucked the fish and ate it. His eyes widened. He ate more. We spent the afternoon together. I learned their word, HOUYHNHNM, meant horse. They called each other, Yahoos. They seemed to see us as Yahoos, beasts like themselves. I realized these creatures were horses, walking and speaking. They used reason and language. They lived in a society. They had tools, rituals, and leaders. They did not harm each other. I felt hope. HOUYHNHNMS were not like Yahoos. They were noble, we were foolish. Perhaps they would help us. As sun fell, the HOUYHNHNMS stood and led us back to the beach. They stopped. One pointed inland. Another tapped his head, then pointed at me. I bowed. They trotted away into the tall grass. We stood still. We watched until they disappeared. None spoke. We walked back to our camp, hearts heavy and full. We had met real masters of reason, but also lived creatures as base as Yahoos. I thought, tomorrow would bring more questions, and perhaps answers. Chapter 3. After our first meeting with the HOUYHNHNMS, I could not sleep well. I kept thinking about them and the Yahoos. At dawn, I woke to the sound of my crewmates stirring. The captain called us together. He spoke quietly. We have seen two sides of this land, the HOUYHNHNMS, rational and calm, and the Yahoos, wild and uncivilized. We must decide what to do. We ate a quick breakfast and then set out with the captain and some men. I carried my small bag. We walked along the shore and then inland, following the path the HOUYHNHNMS made the day before. Yahoo trotted ahead. The land was open meadow with gentle hills. I saw more signs of Yahoos, broken sticks, torn clothes, footprints. But I did not see HOUYHNHNMS again. We walked carefully. Several hours later, we saw a group of HOUYHNHNMS grazing. They were taller than Yahoo but calm and beautiful. They looked at us curiously, then continued grazing. We watched. After some time, a tall HOUYHNHNM came forward. He approached slowly, head high, eyes calm. He watched us with interest. The others stayed back. The tall one lowered his head and neighed softly. I bowed and said, "We come as friends." He neighed again. This I remembered from yesterday. It meant, welcome, or, peace. I smiled and nodded. The captain stepped forward with me. The HOUYHNHNM sniffed us, looking at our faces. He then looked at Yahoo, who bowed to him. The horse lowered his head and neighed to Yahoo. Yahoo neighed back. It was beautiful. These horses were polite and kind. I felt relief. The tall HOUYHNHNM then neighed again and turned. Several other horses came closer. They formed a circle around us. Their calm presence made me feel safe. The captain motioned for me to speak. I said, "We wish to live on this land. We need food and shelter. We do not want harm to the land or its horses." I pointed to the HOUYHNHNM leader and then to the captain. I nodded to show peace. The leader neighed softly. He looked at my companions, then at me. Then he walked around us. He tapped the ground with his hoof, perhaps as a signal. The others neighed. They spoke to each other in soft tones, sounds I could barely understand, as if they spoke without noise. After a while, the lead horse tapped the captain's shoulder gently with his nose. The captain bowed. The horse then went to Yahoo and nuzzled him. Then he returned and neighed again to us. He stood still, head high, looking at the horizon. I thought this meant he would lead us to his home. I smiled and bowed to the captain. The captain nodded back. The horses turned and began to walk, slowly and deliberately. We followed, walking single file. Yahoo stayed close. We walked for miles through grassy fields. The horses paused at streams to drink. We drank, too. They grazed calmly. The captain studied them closely. As we walked, I thought of how different these horses were from people. They did not lie. They did not cheat. They showed no pride or fear. They seemed pure and honest. After a long walk, the horses stopped at a low hill. On top was a small village, houses built of wood and brought water, all simple but neat. It was quiet. The horses walked inside and spoke in low tones. Yahoos followed us, staying near. The leader tapped his hoof on the ground once. The homes opened and more horses came out, curious. Some looked at us. One brought water in a bowl. Another offered grass to eat. I knelt and drank. It tasted fresh and clean. The horses waited. I took a bowl of grass and chewed it politely. The horses neighed softly and nodded. A female HOUYHNHNM, perhaps a leader, came forward. She looked at us with gentle eyes. The male leader neighed softly and lowered his head toward me. I bowed and touched my heart. She neighed back. I understood, they would let us stay for a while. The captain knelt and bowed too. He looked at me. I nodded, grateful. We had been accepted. The horses led us to a small house, wooden, open, with a clean hearth. Inside were bowls of water and some dried grains. I picked up a bowl and ate. It tasted good. We heard the gentle neighing of the village as horses talked softly among themselves. I thought about what this place might become, a home, a land of reason. That night, I slept inside the house, the captain beside me. Yahoo stood at the door. I felt peace. In my dreams, I saw images, the Yahoos screaming and attacking, the HOUYHNHNMS grazing calm and bright, the leader's gentle eyes. I thought of human nature and reason. In the morning, I would learn more. I hoped to meet the master horse, to speak, or neigh, with them. I wanted to understand their law, their mind, their community. Because I knew this land would teach me more, as all the lands had before. And here, I might find the wisest beings I had ever met. Chapter 4. I woke early in the HOUYHNHNM house. The sunlight came through wooden slats. I sat quietly, watching Yahoo nuzzle the door. The captain stirred. We both felt calm, almost peaceful. Outside, I heard gentle neighing. The horses spoke to each other. Some walked by, stopping to look. Others carried bundles of grass and water. Everything was slow and orderly. There was no shouting, no hurry, no mess, only mild, thoughtful movement. The captain and I left the house. Yahoo followed. The leader horse walked with us, guiding our steps. We approached a larger cluster of homes, a small village. I noticed details. Each hut was clean, wood smooth and shaped to fit horses and some two-legged creatures like me. Doorways were low enough for horses and tall enough for me and the captain. In the center, I saw the master horse, older, gray-muzzled, tall, with deep eyes. The leader approached and neighed softly. The master responded and nodded toward us. The leader then neighed gently at us. I bowed. The captain bowed too. The master horse walked closer and spoke with soft neighs. I listened, feeling a deeper calm. The captain placed his pack on the ground. The master tapped it with his hoof. I opened it slowly. Inside were biscuits, flints, rope, and Dr. Gulliver's compass, which I had brought from my travels. The master sniffed at the compass and gently moved it with his hoof. He looked at me thoughtfully. I realized he was curious. I put a flint and rope on the ground. The horse nudged it. He neighed approvingly. Then the master turned and guided us into a large open area. Around us, horses stood in pairs, grazing or drinking from water bowls. They paused and watched. Some sniffed our bags, then returned to their peaceful work. I knelt and poured water into a bowl for the captain. He drank. I poured water into another bowl for me. I drank too. It tasted sweet and clean. One group of horses neighed softly to each other. They told the captain and me it was safe. Smiles touched the captain's face. The master neighed and motioned with his hoof for us to follow him. We walked behind him along a path lined with grass. We came to a place that looked like a council hall. It was open to the sky, with benches made from stone and wood. Several horses stood there, waiting quietly. I realized they were the elders of this community. They were dressed in simple leather straps, like sashes, to show their roles. No gold, no colors, no shine, only plain, useful materials. The master gathered the elders in a circle. He neighed several times, slow, deep calls. The others responded with calm neighs. Then he turned to us and repeated gentle neighing. I bowed. They bowed. The master pointed at the captain, then at me. I said, "We are strangers. We wish to share this land peacefully, to live with you, to learn from your order and reason." I paused. The elders listened. I looked at their wise eyes. The master neighed again. The elders replied more softly. I saw respect and careful thought. They had no hurry. They had no pride. They spoke slowly, as if weighing each sound. Then the master neighed for us to join their circle. We knelt. The horses ate grass near us. One elder came close and sniffed my hair. Another nuzzled the captain's shoulder. It felt gentle, not rough. I rubbed the elder's nose, and he neighed softly. We spent time together. The elders neighed about us. They analyzed our faces, observed our clothes, and smelled our packs. I felt scrutiny but no threat. After some time, the master tapped his hoof, and the elders neighed in agreement. I realized the decision had been made. The master neighed clearly and once again. Then he neighed again, and another elder neighed back. Finally, they turned to the captain and me. I bowed. I understood, they had accepted us as dwellers in their community. We would live here, but under their rules. We had to live like them, cleanly, calmly, with no lies and no pride. The captain stood and spoke softly. We accept your ways, your order, your friendship. We will follow your rules. We thank you. The master neighed once more and turned to the elders. They neighed back and slowly began to walk away as a group. The master stayed and looked at us before leaving too. Yahoo stayed, his gentle neigh soft at my side. We watched them go, then followed quietly to our hut. Inside, I looked at the captain. His face was bright. We are guests of reason, he said quietly. I nodded. Yes. And I feel more peaceful than in England. That night, I wrote in my journal by candle, today I learned that reason gives calm, that lies and pride bring chaos. These horses live with purpose and calm. I hope I can learn their ways. I heard no Yahoo's cry. I heard only the horses breathing peacefully in the darkness. Tomorrow, I will speak again with the master and learn their laws and feelings. I will ask, how can a Yahoos live among such beings, and what must we change? But for now, I rest in peace under sky and horse. Chapter 5. I awoke before sunrise to the quiet neighing of horses and the faint smell of fresh grass. The captain and I dressed quickly and stepped outside. Yahoo-June was already waiting, gently nuzzling at the door. The air was cold but calm and peaceful. The master horse emerged from his stable and looked at me with kind eyes. He neighed softly and flicked his tail. I bowed and greeted him. He neighed again in response. Without words we understood each other. His calm presence made me feel safe. He walked ahead, and the captain and I followed quietly. We entered the council circle again. The elders were seated and grazing quietly. The master joined them, and they greeted him with soft neighs. Then he turned to me and neighed in a rhythm that had been used before, kind but serious. It felt like an invitation to speak again before the elders. I knelt and said, "Master Horse and elders, I am grateful for your peace and order. I wish to learn your ways. I want to live rightly among you. I will not lie, I will not harm, I will speak truth and serve." The master lowered his head and neighed. The elders neighed in harmony. They considered my words. I knelt and watched them listen intently. There was no rush, no impatience, just calm attention. After a time, the master neighed at an elder horse who stood and came to me. The elder sniffed my face, then tapped my shoulder aggressively but not cruelly, as if testing my courage. Then he turned and neighed toward the master. The master neighed back and once more toward me. I bowed and rested my head gently near the elder's neck. He neighed softly as if in approval. I felt warmth and acceptance. I looked at the captain. He smiled and knelt beside me. We both bowed and touched the ground in respect. The master then neighed to me and lowered his head. I stroked his mane softly and he smiled with a quiet sense of trust. They told us by neighing and gestures that we could stay among them under their law. The law was silence over disorder, honesty over lies, respect over pride. I understood that we must live simply and calmly. The master guided us past the council circle down a gentle path. We walked until we reached a stable made for yahoos and guest humans. The building was clean, simple and open. We entered and saw wooden troughs filled with grain and fresh water in bowls. The ground was swept. The captain and I knelt and drank water. Then I sat and chewed some grain. They watched and neither laughed nor sneered. The master stood in the doorway watching us sleepily. Then he neighed softly and trotted away. The captain and I rested and slept untroubled. When I awoke, I found the captain already awake. He smiled and said, "I feel calm as I have never known," and I agreed. We saw that each horse who passed bowed his head gently. We saw no yahoos now. They had hidden in the brush away from calm order. We stepped outside to work. The master had provided small tools for digging and planting. We followed him to a field. The ground was soft. In silence we dug small holes and planted seeds. We worked carefully like the horses. We did not speak, but the master walked among us, guiding where to plant, where to water, leaving hoof prints with care. By noon we planted a small patch of grain. The master neighed and grazed behind us while the elders watched. The wind blew softly. The captain knelt and touched the ground. He whispered, "Thank you, I will care for this land as you do." The master neighed and turned toward the sun as if signaling the work was right. I felt purpose in my heart. Later, the master guided us to a small water pool. We drank again and washed our hands. He neighed toward us to stay clean and orderly. Then he walked away without a sound. As evening came, the horses returned to the village. The master neighed a soft call. I watched as they entered their homes. They bowed their heads to each other. Then quiet fell except for peaceful breathing. The captain and I sat outside our stable. We looked at the stars and heard only night wind. We felt content. I thought of my life in England. Loud words, crowds, pride, lies, and I thought of this place, calm, order, peace, reason. I thought I had never felt such stillness until now. I wrote in my small notebook, under their law I find truth, under their order I find calm, under their respect I find peace. I slept again in peace under starlight, hearing soft neighing. I thought I might learn to live like this forever. Chapter 6. I woke before sunrise, breathing in clean air. The small stable we shared with the captain felt calm and orderly. Yahoo-June waited quietly outside. I stepped out and saw the master horse nearby. He neighed to greet me, and I bowed deeply. I could feel the morning peace. We followed him again, silently walking toward the fields. The captain and I carried simple tools, wooden shovels and baskets. The earth was soft and damp. We knelt to work. The master watched, eyes calm and encouraging. I felt a sense of belonging. After planting new grain in the soil, I asked quietly in my mind, how can I speak with them? The horses did not use words the way humans do. They spoke in gentle neighs and subtle movements. But I felt their meaning clearly in my heart. When the work was done, the master led us into the village's commons area, a place where horses gathered to rest and chat. Some ate grass. Others drank water. All were peaceful. I knelt and drank water with the captain. We did not laugh or shout. We sat calmly like them. One elder came over and sniffed the captain's hands. Then he tapped his hoof gently and neighed. I placed my hand on the elder's neck. He closed his eyes. I felt trust. The master neighed loudly. The village paused. He neighed again and walked forward. They followed him silently. I realized he wanted us to go with them. We rose and followed in order. They led us to a larger field far from the village. There, a gathering was taking place, many horses standing quietly in lines, facing a large stone. The stone looked like a simple altar. Around it, the elders stood. We too stood behind the others. The air was still. I felt that something important was happening. One of the elders neighed softly. The others neighed back. I sensed it was a ceremony, a way for them to show respect for their law and their world. The tall master stood by the stone. He neighed again, a clear, deep sound. The crowd neighed in response. It was as if they confirmed something together. I bowed my head with them. Then I heard a soft call, almost like the wind but inside my mind. The master stood still. The horses quieted. A light breeze passed. The air felt respectful. Then the master neighed again and walked 3 times around the stone. The other horses followed. They neighed softly in rhythm. It felt like a pledge, a promise to live by reason and peace. When the ceremony ended, the horses returned to their places. The master walked to me and touched my shoulder with his muzzle. He neighed softly. I bowed. I understood, a promise had been made on my behalf. I would live by their way. The ceremony over, they invited us to join in work and rest. The master led us gently back to the village. Some horses touched noses with the captain, maybe to welcome him properly. I touched neighs back with them, nodding low. Back at home, I asked the captain if he heard the ceremony inside his head. He nodded, eyes bright. I said, yes. We both understood that words were not always needed when hearts are open. For the rest of the day, we carried water to fields, repaired tools, and trimmed grass. We did everything calmly. I felt pride that we were living by their standards. I began to believe that reason could shape life more than strength. When evening came, the captain and I returned to our stable. Yahoo was waiting. The master stood near the entrance, watching. He neighed softly and flicked his tail. I bowed and stepped aside, resting under peaceful skies. That night, as I lay on the clean ground, I thought of how different this world was from England. There were no laws written in fear. There were no prisons. There were no wars. There was calm and respect. I closed my eyes and remembered our pledge by the stone. A simple promise, but powerful. I thought of how humans fight and yell, but horses speak softly and live equally. I wrote in my journal, I vow to live among reason. I vow to set aside pride. I vow to speak only what I believe. I vow to serve others in peace. Under their quiet skies I find my heart. And so I drifted to sleep. Chapter 7. I woke just before dawn by gentle hoofsteps and soft neighs outside our stable. I rose quietly, careful not to disturb the captain or Yahoo. I stepped into the fresh morning air, feeling a calm stillness I had never known back in England. The master horse stood near the entrance. When I appeared, he neighed gently, and I bowed in return. He flicked his ear and turned to walk. I followed, the captain walking beside me, both of us feeling a peaceful obedience. There was no hurry. Only purpose. We reached the council circle, where the elders were already grazing and talking softly. We knelt at the edge. The master neighed once, and all the elders paused and looked toward us. I bowed again. The master turned to me and neighed in a thoughtful tone. I understood he wanted to speak through our thoughts again. I knelt and said, Master Horse and elders, I live here by your kindness, I honor your law, I will speak and act with reason, I will serve this land. The master neighed softly in reply. The elders neighed too in harmony. They acknowledged my words. Then a delicate neigh echoed, like the rustle of leaves. A young mare stepped forward. She looked at me with gentle eyes. The master neighed and moved forward. The mare circled around me. She neighed in short, soft calls. I knelt and touched her muzzle. The mare neighed again and tapped my knee. She looked at the elders. They neighed back. The master neighed softly. I felt warmth and acceptance flow through me. The mare then paced in a small circle, then stopped and looked at the elders. They neighed once. The mare neighed back. She stepped to me and pressed her head against my shoulder. I gently stroked her neck. She neighed softly and walked back to the elders, who neighed again to her. I realized that the mare had welcomed me by herd custom. It was gentle and personal. I felt grateful and honored. The elders neighed slowly and began grazing. The master called softly. The mare and elders moved aside. The master turned to me and neighed. I bowed deeply. We followed him to fields beyond the village. In the distance I saw yahoos, hiding from the horses. They watched us suspiciously but did not approach. In the fields, we worked until high sun. We pulled weeds, gathered water, and tended to horses. I watched the mare grazing near seekers. I felt she was teaching us by example, calm strength, caring, true living. At midday, we returned to the village. The master led us to a place where bowls of water were offered. I knelt and drank, then drank again. My thirst felt cleansed. The young mare appeared beside the water bowls. She stood by Yahoo. She neighed softly at him, and he neighed back, wagging his head proudly. It warmed me to see that friendship grow. The master neighed to me and the captain. We bowed. He then led us beside a group of children, young horses. They looked at us with curiosity. One young colt neighed at the captain and gestured with a hoof. The captain bent down and touched its neck. The colt neighed again happily and trotted back to its mother. I realized that the master allowed us into daily life, even among children. That was a sign of trust. We spent the afternoon with more work, carrying water, dividing seeds, trimming grass. Yahoo was given small work too. He fetched water and stood near a foal. I patted presently, "Oh sorry, Yahoo." The young mare often came to stand beside me, as if checking on how I was living. She looked kindly but alert. I felt a teacher's care. As shadows lengthened, the master neighed and gathered the elders. We walked back to the council circle. The young mare and Yahoo followed. We knelt at the edge. The elders paused, nodded once, and returned to grazing. The master neighed softly, then walked away. We returned to our stable. I knelt and whispered to the captain, "I feel they trust us more than yesterday." He nodded. Inside, I wrote in my journal. Today they showed me acceptance and instruction. They welcomed me like family. They trusted me among horses young and old. I learned that reason grows through gentle care. That evening, I entered the stable. Yahoo whinnied softly. The young mare appeared at the doorway. She neighed and nuzzled Yahoo's shoulder. Yahoo whinnied again. I stroked him gently. The mare neighed once more in farewell and trotted away. I bowed to her, touched my heart, and stepped inside. The captain and I lit a small lamp. We spoke softly. He said, "I feel we have been adopted." I replied, "Yes. We live by their words and their peace." He nodded. "And I feel more peaceful than I ever did in England." We sat in silence, listening to the night winds and the horses breathing softly. The stable was open to the sky, but I no longer felt the cold. I felt calm in my heart. Before sleep, I whispered, "Tomorrow I will speak with the master horse alone. I want to learn more about law, about reason, about living truly." I lay back on the clean bedding, watched the stars peeking through wooden slats, and drifted into the calmest sleep of my life. Chapter 8. I woke before sunrise. A calm hush lay over the stable. I stepped outside and saw the master horse approaching. His coat seemed to shine in the morning light, and his eyes were calm and patient. I bowed deeply. He neighed softly in greeting. I felt a deep respect toward him. We walked silently toward the village. The captain, Yahoo, and I followed in order. The morning air smelled of fresh grass and dew. The horses moved as one, each step placed with care. There was no hurry, no noise, only purpose. We reached the council circle where the elders stood waiting. The master neighed, and they greeted him. I knelt with the captain and bowed our heads. The master neighed again and turned to me. I understood he wished to speak, through gentle neighs and calm presence. I knelt and said mentally, "Master and elders, I am honored by your guidance. I wish to understand your law. I wish to follow reason. I want to live justly under your care." The elders neighed softly in reply. I felt a sense of unity with them. I realized how important law was in this land, a law understood in the heart rather than written in books. The master neighed and turned us toward a path through the fields. We walked together past pastures where horses grazed peacefully. There was not a single broken fence, no litter, no cries. The landscape was silent except for soft hoofbeats and distant bird calls. We came to a small meadow. The master stopped and neighed. I knelt with the captain. The master neighed again slowly and looked at me sharply, as if testing my understanding. Then he trotted away a few paces and looked back. I felt he wanted me to follow. The captain and I stood and walked. Yahoo trotted beside us. The master walked to the center of the meadow. He neighed and stepped in a gentle circle. He paused and neighed again. Then he began to move gracefully, tracing shapes on the ground. I realized he was demonstrating law and order, showing how each step must follow the last. He moved in a pattern that spoke of balance and intention. The captain and I watched closely. We guessed that this was a way the HOUYHNHNMS taught reason, by showing it through action. The master finished his circle, stopped, and turned to me. He neighed softly. I knelt and nodded. The captain bowed too. The master neighed again and trotted to one side. I followed him and kneeled beside him. The captain knelt beside me. We sat quietly. After a moment of silence, the master neighed and pointed with his muzzle toward the fields, then toward the sky. He neighed again. I realized he was telling us that law connected everything, earth and sky, reason and duty, each life and each day. I thought of England, its laws written on paper, full of arguments and fear. Here the law was not spoken. It was shown, felt, lived. The master turned and neighed softly. The elders neighed back. Then he walked away and the herd followed, grazing peacefully. I walked behind with the captain and Yahoujhn. We returned to the village. I felt changed, like I now knew something deeper, something beyond words. At home, I found fresh water and food left by a thoughtful horse. I knelt and drank gratefully. The captain did the same. Yahoujhn drank too. Then I sat down and wrote in my journal by candlelight. Law is not rules written on paper. Law is life lived with reason. Law is calm action. Law is love shown through order. I understand that the master shows poetry in steps, not words. That night, the stable was silent. I lay on simple bedding, listening to soft breathing. I thought of the fields, the wise horses, the sky above. I felt I was learning a language of silence and action. Tomorrow, I would ask the master about yahoos, about why they exist, why they remain wild, and whether they could learn as we have. I felt a growing urgency to understand the difference between horse reason and human impulse. I closed my eyes, feeling the peace of this land fill my heart. The last thing I felt was a gentle neigh in the darkness, an offering of trust and hope. Chapter 9. I woke to the soft sound of neighing and the smell of fresh grass. The captain and I rose early. We remained quiet as we stepped outside. Yahoujhn followed. Morning light revealed peaceful fields and the stillness of the village. The master horse approached and neighed gently. I bowed. He neighed softly again. I joined the captain in following his lead. He guided us through the village to the council circle. The elders gathered there. The master greeted them with a calm neighing. I knelt beside the captain. I understood that today we would speak again, this time, about the yahoos. I bowed my head respectfully. The master neighed low and looked around the circle. The elders responded. I spoke in my mind. Master and elders, I am grateful for what you taught me. I wish to understand about yahoos. Why do they live among you? Why are they wild and dreadful? Can they learn reason and peace? The master neighed softly. The elders neighed back. I sensed they considered my questions seriously. Then the master walked toward a group of yahoos. They were on the edge of the village, hidden in tall grass. A few left their hiding place and stared. They looked messy, they had torn clothes, unwashed faces, wild hair. They mumbled and spat. One even pointed its finger and shouted something incomprehensible. The master neighed sternly and tapped his hoof on the ground. The yahoos froze. One of them whimpered. The master neighed again, softer this time, and the yahoos stayed still and began to retreat into the grass. The master turned and neighed at me. I bowed. The elders neighed. I understood that the horses did not trust yahoos. They believed that yahoos could not live by their law. The captain and I knelt. I continued silently. Master and elders, I understand that yahoos are beasts. But are they forever unreasoned? Can they change and learn true living? The master neighed once and shook his head slightly. The elders neighed in agreement. I realized they believed the yahoos were lost to reason. I felt sadness but understood their view. I then asked in my mind, Master and elders, if yahoos cannot learn reason, what should we do with humans like us, who are partly yahoos and partly reason? The master neighed thoughtfully. The elders neighed. They spoke to the leader horse. He neighed back and looked at us with serious eyes. Then he neighed and pointed with his muzzle toward the stream, then toward the fields, then toward the sky. I thought he meant, observe nature, observe peace, and hold reason above wildness. I closed my eyes and listened. I heard the stream's soft flow, the wind through the grass, the gentle breathing of the horses. Then I asked, Master and elders, will you teach me more of your law, so I may live truly, and so I may teach others to live with reason? The master neighed again, long and steady. The elders responded in harmony. I understood, they agreed. They would show me more. I opened my eyes. The master neighed and tapped his hoof. The herd turned and walked toward the circle. The elders followed. The master neighed gently, leading me and the captain to follow. We returned to the village, hearts filled. We had begun the deepest lessons, about wildness, reason, and our own natures. At home, I wrote in my journal. I asked about yahoos. They said yahoos cannot learn reason. They believe I can learn more of their law. They will teach me how to be true. I looked out at the night sky and thought of England, its people proud and noisy. I prayed I could hold steadiness like the horses, and find reason even in my wild parts. That night, I slept calmly, knowing tomorrow would bring new lessons, and a chance to learn even more of the HOUYHNHNM way. Chapter 10. I woke early to the gentle sound of neighing. The master horse stood nearby. I bowed and he neighed softly in return. Yahoo and the captain appeared. Together, we walked to the council circle where the elders grazed quietly. The master neighed, and the elders responded in calm tones. I understood today they would teach us more, especially about humans and yahoos. I knelt and offered, Master and elders, I thank you for your wisdom. I wish to learn how to live. I wish to guide humans toward peace. I ask help to find reason within us. The master neighed softly and tapped the ground. The elders neighed back. I felt their agreement. They would teach. We followed the master down a gentle path toward a meadow beside the stream. The deer and birds watched calmly. We knelt beside the stream. I filled my water flask and drank. The master neighed, urging us to pay attention to nature's rhythm, water flowing always forward, not backward. The master led us to a fallen branch and pointed. I knelt and cleaned it. The master neighed calmly and tapped it with his hoof, as if teaching me to care for broken things. The captain and I mimicked him, cleaning other pieces. I felt it was symbolic, care mends what is broken. Next, the master led us to a rocky hill. He reached it and neighed clearly, perhaps showing us a high place gives wide sight. I climbed up slowly. I looked back at the village, the fields, and the circle of elders. I felt connected to the land. The master neighed again, tapping the ground with one hoof and then the other, shifting weight peacefully. I realized he was showing balance, not hurried steps, not prideful leaps, but calm, steady rhythm. We returned to the village and the stable. There, a group of yahoos stood quietly at a distance. They looked smaller now, more like frightened beasts than humans. The master neighed and walked toward them. The yahoos stumbled backward and hid. The master returned to us and neighed, perhaps saying that yahoos could not learn reason but must be kept separate. I knelt and said mentally, Master and elders, I understand yahoos may harm reason. I agree humans must learn balance. Help me teach others to care for reason. The master neighed in reply. The elders neighed too. I felt their approval. The captain and I spent the afternoon caring for the fields. We cleared weeds and planted seeds where the master showed. We worked in silence, guided by his calm movement. Memories of England seemed loud and distant. I felt small but peaceful. That evening, we walked back to the council circle. The master neighed softly and tapped the ground thrice. The elders responded. I knelt and thought, he is blessing our work. At home in the stable, I wrote. Today I learned about care and balance. To heal broken things is to serve. To stand without pride brings peace. To keep yahoos apart protects reason. I felt I was growing. I looked at Yahoo June, who neighed softly. I patted him. He neighed back, trusting me. I looked at the captain. He nodded in pride and humility. In my heart, I said, Thank you, Master. That night, I slept deeply. My dreams were filled with flowing streams, balanced steps, and quiet fields. I felt I was learning the true nature of reason, not in books, but in living gently and true. Chapter 11. I awoke just before dawn, feeling the familiar calm of the stable. Yahoo June stood quietly outside. The captain and I rose and stepped into the soft morning light. Dew covered the grass. The master horse approached, and I bowed deeply. He neighed softly in greeting. Each breath felt peaceful. We walked together to the council circle, where elders grazed and whispered in hoof-soft voices. The master neighed gently, and the elders greeted him in quiet harmony. I knelt with my head bowed out of respect. The master neighed to signal our focus on today's lesson. I knelt and continued silently. Master and elders, I am grateful for what you have taught. I feel reason growing in my heart. I wish to learn how to help humans choose peace. I wish to understand how your law can guide us. The master neighed slowly, and the elders neighed in agreement. I understood today's lesson would be about humans, reason, and how to live among us. The master walked forward with measured steps. The captain and I followed. Yahoo June trotted beside us. The path led into a wide field where yahoos sometimes gathered. I looked ahead and saw signs of human presence, broken tools, old clothes, footprints. But no people. The master stopped. He neighed once, then twice. The elders gathered around. I felt their intent, their question, are humans able to learn reason? I knelt and said mentally, Master and elders, I believe humans can learn reason, but it requires patience, humility, and care. We must practice calm living, honest speech, loving service. The master neighed thoughtfully. Several elders responded with soft neighs. They seemed to listen and weigh my words carefully. Then the master tapped his hoof on the ground and walked toward a distant yahoo's nest, an area of torn clothes, discarded bones, muddy pools. He neighed sharply. A few scattered yahoos appeared, watching from afar. They looked wild, hungry, fearful, suspicious. The master neighed again, in calm but firm tones. The yahoos quivered and moved back. I realized, the horses held authority over the yahoos, they demand respect through silent poise and gentle power. The master neighed softly again and led us back near the council circle. The elders followed. I knelt beside them and sensed that the horses had made a decision. Humans could learn reason, but yahoos could not. They believed we stood on the edge, we had reason, but we must choose it fully. I felt both hope and challenge. I then vowed silently, I will teach other humans. By showing calm and honest living, by guiding step by step, by planting reason in small choices. I will not give up on human hearts. The master neighed once and nodded, their sign of acceptance. Elders neighed in support. I felt a warm breeze like approval. We returned to the village. The master led us to a field where work had been done earlier. Today, he guided us in planting new seeds deeper, we were symbolically planting reason. We worked quietly, following his lead, each movement thoughtful and calm. All day, we repaired fences, gathered water, and kneaded soil. Each action had meaning. When a tool broke, the master showed me how to mend it. When roots tangled, he guided me patiently. I learned to see tasks not as chores, but as lessons in care. At midday, the young mare and Yahoo June came by. The mare neighed to me, nuzzling my arm. I bowed and stroked her gently. I felt a teacher's love. In the afternoon, the master led us again near the Yahoo's area. He neighed and gestured to the captain. The task today would be teaching protection, not punishment. We gathered sticks and stones to mark a boundary between the horse's village and the Yahoo's nest. We did it with respect and balance. When finished, I knelt and said silently, we will care for this land. We will protect the peace you have built. We will guide humans toward reason. We will keep wildness at bay. The master neighed softly and walked away. I understood, today we helped build the space where reason can grow free. As dusk fell, we returned to the stable. Farmers' lamps glowed on wooden posts. I wrote in my journal. Today I learned that humans can learn reason, but only if we choose it. The master taught me that work can be a lesson. We built boundaries, not walls. We planted seeds deeper than soil. That night, I lay under the stars and heard only the horses' breaths. I felt hope. I felt purpose awaken in me. Tomorrow we would speak again with the master, to learn more of law, balance, and how humanity may walk with reason, not with wildness. Chapter 12. The final lesson of reason. I woke early, but this morning felt different, a quiet weight in my heart. I stepped outside, and Yahoo June greeted me with a gentle nuzzle. The master horse stood nearby, patient and knowing. I bowed deeply in greeting. His soft neigh returned my respect. I knew today we would reach the final lesson. We walked to the council circle. The elders were gathered, grazing in respectful quiet. The master neighed, and they welcomed him with soft replies. I approached and knelt with the captain. We joined the circle in silence. The master neighed clearly, then once more. I understood he wished to speak deeply, through thought, not words. I closed my eyes and thought. Master and elders. I am grateful for every lesson. I have learned to care for reason. I have learned to live by your law. I have seen the danger of wildness in yahoos. The master neighed and the elders neighed back softly. I continued. I now ask the final question. How can humans return to England? How can they change their old ways? How can they teach others reason? The air was still. The master turned to the elders. They neighed among themselves, calm and thoughtful. Finally, the master neighed and pointed his muzzle toward me, then toward the horizon beyond the fields, toward the sky. I bent my head. I felt his meaning. I must return. I must bring reason back with me. It was my final lesson, to act, not just learn. The captain and I stood. The master led us back slowly to the stable. Yahoo June walked between us. The air felt heavy with farewell. Inside our stable, I knelt and closed my eyes. I acknowledged my heart's change. I felt the pull to bring wisdom home. The master neighed softly at my shoulder. I bowed. I patted him and said in my mind, "Thank you, my friend." Outside, the captain packed our simple things. Yahoo June stood quietly. At the edge of the village, the master neighed once. The elders neighed. We bowed and stepped away. We walked in silence to the coast. Yahoo June followed us part way, then stopped to nuzzle our shoulders goodbye. His soft neigh felt like a blessing. We reached the shore. A small boat waited. The captain turned to me. We both felt emotion, tears remained unshed. We said nothing, the land spoke for itself. I knelt and bowed to the east, toward the village and the horses. Then I stepped into the boat. The captain joined me. Yahoo June neighed again and watched us fade with the tide. I held a hoofprint in my mind. We rowed through calm seas toward the merchant ship that would take us home to England. The world felt larger now, but I carried a quiet strength from the HOUYHNHNMS. During the voyage, I found I did not speak much. I thought of main lessons. Reason must be lived. Wild strength without order destroys. Kind care heals. Humble living brings peace. Teaching by example moves hearts. I wrote letters to people I'd met, scholars, politicians, neighbors, telling them of the land of horses and the law of true reason. I asked them to listen, to learn, and to change. When we reached England, the return was strange. The morning felt louder, sharper. Roads were crowded. People shouted. Money changed hands quickly. Pride showed in clothing and speech. I walked home slowly, each step measured. When I reached my garden gate, I paused and thought, today begins my second voyage, home within myself. At home, my family greeted me with joy. I hugged them gently. I told them I had seen wonders, and that true power lives not far away, but here, in humble care and honest work. I wrote my last chapters in my book. I explained why I had changed, why I could not live only in stories. I ended with a call. Let each man live with reason. Let each man treat wild thoughts like yahoos. Let each man speak truth. Let each man serve quietly. And may reason guide our laws, our homes, our hearts. The book closed with a final note. I once sailed the wide oceans, traveled through strange lands, and met giants, thinkers, spirits, immortals, and noble horses. But the greatest voyage is the one within, to live by reason, kindness, and humble purpose. And so ends my tale of travels, and of the lessons they taught.